OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30, OTB AM. Adrian with you on this Friday morning. I've almost forgotten what it is to do this thing, but here we go. And it's not quite Eoin Sheahan from Wales. Good morning to you. It's not quite a Roy Keane level of sort of been away from the hot seat that long, but still sort of looking at the microphone going, what happened? Tap, tap. What happens here again? How are you getting on?
Good, and on behalf of me and the 4 or 5 YouTube commenters who love you, welcome back and happy Friday.
Thank you, Eoin. You were outside the artist formerly known as the Cardiff Arms Park.
Yeah, the Principality Stadium, the artist formerly known as the Millennium Stadium, and the Cardiff Arms Park right there. There's obviously no game here today or this weekend, Adrian, so I've come to the wrong place. I'm looking for a little bit of action or anything like that. So it also feels to me like Wales-Ireland weekend in the Six Nations is just greeted with misery when it comes from the skies. Like, it is completely overcast here. It was beautiful at times yesterday, pelting down with rain, quite blustery, and it just feels like it's right.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It just feels like this is Wales versus Ireland. Like, I remember working at the game in Dublin 2 years ago, and I almost lost my tripod. It flew across the road, and there was just this 3 years ago. I don't even know what year it is. 2020. 2 years ago, and it's just these chaotic conditions that you sometimes endure around this time of year. So the Six Nations really is here.
What's from a country point of view and a re-emerging back into the planet point of view, what's Cardiff like of a Friday morning at 7:30? Is a bit of a buzz about it? Are people milling around to work? Where's Cardiff at with the whole re-emergence?
It's not really in terms of 7:30 on a Friday morning. I would have expected it to be a little bit busier. Even yesterday after we came off air, hopping on a bus to get out to meet Ross Harris, who we'll bring to you later on. That was pre 9 o'clock. That was rush hour, and there was nobody really on the buses. But if you're asking me what Cardiff City Centre is like at night time, it is a completely different story. Even without events being on it, there was a little bit of energy in the city. Last night, it was like 3 or 4 different Harcourt streets around the place in the aftermath of the darts. Just people in penguin suits queuing up for nightclubs all around the city centre. It was quite nice to see. So yeah, they're very much back to normal. But there isn't. I'm not sure if this is a thing. There's not so much hustle and bustle around the city centre. It's more a socialising spot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great city. I know you were talking about it on the show last night in terms of its size, and I know you were talking about the design of it. I think it's more like it's a small city, isn't it? So it's like you do definitely have everything in really close proximity, which helps. And you've obviously been making waves across the internet as well over the last 24 hours on with your chats with. Where were the Welsh kids that were telling you to F off home essentially?
They were at Llandaff RFC. I'm surprised you didn't watch the full 8 minutes package from the rugby club. I don't know why that's not doing the business. I'm not sure why people are only choosing to spend 13 seconds with me and my content from Llandaff RFC the other night. There was other great characters involved as well, not just the under-10 boys team, but I don't know, they've obviously taken on some sort of internet stardom, and I hope he knows that boy, by the way, that he is a TikTok superstar at this point, because that seems to be the platform where that's really caught fire. Yeah,
I was very much impressed by he knew the rules of engagement of OTB AM straight off the bat. He was like, not messing around, straight, a bit of conflict going, bring it on, let's have it. Very impressed by him.
Yeah, he clearly has been watching Ger Gilroy and John Duggan all week, slamming Wales to men who've let us down as a show, I think it's fair to say, Adrian.
You mentioned the darts on. It's about a month since we were watching, and like the world, certainly this part of the world, felt as if it was in a slightly different space at that stage when we were watching the darts, and everybody was crammed into a room and everybody was going buck crazy, and people were commenting about the fact that the players would have to walk on and off the stage with their mask on, yet there was like throngs of people poured all over each other in the bleachers. What was it like last night?
It was very Welsh, first of all, because they've got 2 players in the Premier League darts at the moment, 2 people that they think that can come in the whole thing. The reigning champion is Welsh, world number 1 PDC wise is Welsh. So there's a real feeling when they're walking in that this is them going to support their country as much as anything else. It was the first night of Premier League darts. Obviously, we were over here to try and get a sense of what the city is like and what the Welsh mood is like in the build-up to the Ireland game for the Six Nations. But I think we got a pretty good sense of that in the queues before the darts. As we'll bring to you a little bit later on, people are pretty excited about this weekend. And I mean, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but people are saying that the two major national pastimes of Wales at this point are rugby and darts. So this is it's an interesting development, and it's a new development, and like it is kind of ironic people attending the darts, because when you're chatting to them, and as I say, they're dressed up as Elmo or whatever. But I think there's actually a semi-serious point in there that this thing has taken over, because they've had relative success over the last couple of years.
I was at the dart as a bunch of us from the office were darts down the whatever it was 3 Arena a few years ago, and like great, fantastic night out, but it was really not a huge amount to do with the darts. Was that your experience of it last night, or were people actually into it?
If you want to watch the darts, you cannot go to the darts. Like, I mean, there were some people that were like standing up in the bleachers and were like cheering every shot, but I don't know how you managed to keep an eye on it all. Like, I mean, obviously you are watching it on a big screen. That's a cliche that's as old as time at this stage. It's all about the psychology of it, about trying to put off your enemy. And last night it was about putting off the evil enemy of England. So in the first round it was England versus Wales. It was James Wade versus Gerwyn Price. And there was a fair few English people in the crowd trying to boo and jeer Gerwyn Price, but mostly it was jeering towards James Wade. There's a real level of distaste for England, which you may or may not be surprised to hear about when it comes to the Welsh sports psyche. Not that there was any Irish players to gauge it by, but like Gary Anderson will get a very good reception here, who's from Scotland, and same with Peter Wright. But James Wade got a little bit more of a spicy reception, I found anyway. It may not have come through on TV because of the fact that he was English.
And I also wondered about your own reception on it. Have you been recognised in the streets? The star, of course, of Wales Online not that long ago. Have you been confronted by anybody? You're that guy.
No. So,
not a sinner.
No. Like as we discussed many a time over the last couple of weeks, I mean, I had an awakening. I had the awakening that we called it wrong last year, and I think maybe the people of Cardiff have been happy to kind of accept that as I've been here over the last little while. You put someone else in the streets. I mean, that 10-year-old boy from the rugby club the other day probably wouldn't be too slow in giving Ger or John a piece of his mind. I
love how you're continuously separating yourself from the lads, by the way. That is a proper come to Jesus moment.
We hammer them tomorrow, and then I'll be like, oh, right. Listen, here's my clip from last year as well as this year. I saw this coming all along.
Here, have you been? You're obviously up early this morning, and you're looking very fresh, I have to say. Have you been able to get out and sample the delights like we out until all hours last night, or how does that work?
No, unfortunately, I was at work, putting together a bit on the darts till all hours last night. So we'll hopefully see a bit of that a little bit later on. I'm not sure I wanted to go and sample the delights last night, to be quite honest with you. I think maybe it had got to a level post darts that was intolerable for somebody who hadn't been engaging in the pre-darts festivities, put it that way, or during the darts festivities. If you're coming out of there just kind of like stone cold at whatever time it was, 11, 12 o'clock, then you just want to go straight home and just finish off a few bits. So no, I haven't. Like, I mean, I said during the week, I mean, we've got to come back for an actual game and try and see what the city is properly all about at night time.
It's, as I said, I studied just outside Cardiff, and I know it a small bit, and was there a few years ago as well with, I won't mention the person who is an OTB employee. We both at that time worked for different companies. We both ended up going out for a few drinks, and we both ended up the pace for me was a bit hot. I'm not going to lie to you, the pace was a bit hot, right. And I remember I remember very little, but one awakening certainly was been outside a hotel in Cardiff city centre at about 3 o'clock in the morning, been waking up outside my hotel door, knocking on my own hotel door. Needless to say, there was nobody in the hotel, and I was stood there in my jocks, 3 o'clock in the morning, Cardiff city centre hotel, not knowing how the hell I'd managed to get out there, and trying to figure out how the hell I was going to get back in, because Cardiff City Centre Hotel at 3 o'clock in the morning, the reception is pretty busy, it's pretty heaving, it's pretty hopping. People are pouring back out in the nightclubs and back into the hotel. I rang the reception and said, listen, bit of a pickle here. There was like a phone in the hallway. I'm stuck in the hall here, and I'm in my jocks, and I ain't coming down. I'm not saying it was as lucid, the conversation, as it appears this morning, but that was the general gist of things. And the guy was like, not a chance, mate. You got to come down here and get your own key. I'm flat out. And I was like, and I was, by the way, I found myself out there because I was bursting for a leak given events of the previous few hours, and I was like, listen dude, if you don't, or somebody appear up here with a key in the next few minutes, this leak is going to happen in the hall. So happily for everybody, it was resolved amicably, and the key was returned, and I got back into my room, and nobody had to suffer the circumstance, the outcome of that.
My night must have been so boring that you were after burying yourself here with that story, Adrian. I applaud you, and I doff the cap to you for doing that. Talk about service in that hotel. When you ring down, it's like, can you please drop my key up? And he's just like, nah, mate, not doing that for you. He was like, clearly found it hilarious.
He was right. No, he was right. He was absolutely right. Like, there was probably a couple of hundred people in the hotel lobby that he was like having to probably on his own sort of like manage. And then there's Egypt on the, I need to go for a leak. I'm surprised he should have probably just left me there. But look, all was well that ends well, although paid for it obviously the next morning. So that's that. There's plenty of chat on around, and I know you've loads coming up. You're going to be talking to Eddie Butler. Do you want to flag that up for people? What's the nature? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I sat down for a chat with Eddie Butler yesterday up in Abergavenny. As somebody who lived in and around Cardiff, Adrian, you might have been up there before. It is really, really nice town up in a different part of the valley to the one that I was in the other day. Kind of feels more of a well-to-do area and a big market town, and it's been really well developed over the last little while. So he's been living there for basically all his life, just outside that town. He is obviously one of the great voices of rugby. We're going to chat a lot about his own memories, especially some of the games in the 1980s. Well, of course, all the games, his entire career was in the 1980s, playing for Wales. We're going to chat a little bit about his commentary career. Brian Moore is going to step away from the commentary booth from the men's Six Nations anyway this weekend. We'll do a bit on that, poetry, and then as flagged the other day, Eddie is a massive voice for the idea of Welsh independence, and that's all it is at the moment, an idea. And maybe movement is how you can describe it as well over the next little while. So we'll be chatting a bit about that. An incredibly proud Welshman, and it's a good chat. It's coming up later on. Yeah,
I was interested actually. I did watch the full pieces of some of your stuff from Wales over the last few days, and one of the contributors talking about the fact that actually a lot of Welsh people would not be all that on board with the idea of independence. That a lot of them are coming from stock that might be English or Scottish or Irish, and feel as if it's a bit of a melting pot. And certainly my recollection of my time there was very much not that. It was that a lot of people wanted to get away and do their own thing.
Yeah, it's because I did ask that in the piece that we're going to bring to you. Was that just a bit of a straw poll that I did? And he definitely feels that there is this part of the Welsh psyche which doesn't believe in itself, and that is basically what he's going to say in the piece. That there's just a lack of self-belief sometimes in Wales. There is this umbilical cord that they have at Westminster, and they believe that if you get rid of that life will be a lot worse. And he just doesn't subscribe to that whatsoever, Eddie Butler. He thinks that if you get free of the shackles of England, they will be able to prosper in a different way. So I guess it's a difference of an opinion. I guess years and years of being tied to the UK can get you into a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, I guess, and that's possibly a feeling that pervades around the country. It ties in nicely to the rugby though, because it does feel that everybody is different over these next however long the Six Nations is going to last, for 7 weeks or whatever. It's a sense of being really Welsh for people who are from here over the next little while in a way that they wouldn't feel Welsh today, for example. Tomorrow they kick into a whole other gear, whether or not they want their country to be on its own 2 feet or not. Yeah.
It does stoke the patriotism. All right, Dahi O'Shaughnessy on YouTube this morning wondering if I found out exactly why I was left outside my room at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I maybe did not explain that entirely. I was obviously the other side of a few shandies and had thought I was walking into the bathroom, walked out my front door, and then suddenly realised, this hallway is not the Jacks. And that's what happened there. Dahi, thanks for the clarification. And Peter G, also on YouTube, says, blink 3 times if you need help, Eoin.
No,
I'm fine.
Everything is totally fine where I
am. We are good. You've loads of stuff in the can that we're going to bring our viewers this morning. We're going to get to that in a few minutes' time. But I do want to mention Roy Keane is back on the papers again this morning. Listen, he's been on the papers all week, and he'll be on them probably for the next 12 to 14 months or whatever the average duration, the average lifespan of a manager is these days if he gets this Sunderland gig. But Keane is mustered on the back page of the Star, kind of sums it up, and it's generally the gist of things. And there's been some commentary obviously over the last 24 hours as well. Aidan McGeady, who's still actually a Sunderland player, despite lack of appearances. Talking about it yesterday, he wants him in. Gabby Bonlahor, 2-footed challenge yesterday with reflections on Keane's final days at Aston Villa back in 2014, and how Agbonlahor had said to him, was discussing something with Paul Lambert, and Keane jumped in and he said, listen, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the manager. And the very next day Roy Keane leaves. So Gabby Agbonlahor basically saying, listen, it was me that wrote his death note. So there's a lot of that going on. But I mean, look at my view, and I know you've talked about it a lot during the week, but my view on it would be that 2.5 years ago, this guy sat on a stage with us down in Dublin's Docklands, and like, he issued, for what Roy Keane must have been, I'm sure he would have given it some consideration, but I mean, it was a come and get me plea, right, for to get back into management, and reiterated that plea several times thereafter. But you know, he has not found a scratch since, and I do think that for Roy Keane to bring himself to a position where he's publicly saying, I want to get back into management, I think that would have been a wrench for him. I'd say he's more of the mind that would rather go about his business privately and not have to get into that. But there hasn't been a scratch for him over that 2.5 years, despite saying, listen, I want to get back in, I'll take an opportunity wherever it's going. And in terms of his punditry, look, it's brilliant, and I've certainly tuned into him and tuned into games that I wouldn't otherwise be watching only for him. But like, it is an opportunity for him to go back to reattach himself to what it is to be involved in professional football in 2022 now, and find out exactly what it is that make the modern player tick, and go and do it for 12 or 14 months. That's the lifespan of a manager anyway, no matter who it is. If it's Roy Keane or whoever else it is that takes the gig, that's all you're getting, and that's all it's going to be. And let's not fool ourselves about anything else. And he'll come back and sit in the pundit's chair for another 20, 25 years thereafter, and he can dine out on his second coming at Sunderland thereafter. I think go for it, get back at it.
Yeah, I'm not sure would I go that far, but I definitely think that there is a chapter of the story left to be unwritten, and I think he probably feels that stronger than most, that there wasn't a verdict on his management. I think that as I say that, you do think of the Republic of Ireland, you do think of even Ipswich, and I just wonder if he thinks that actually they weren't a verdict at all, and that he does need to go back just one more time, dip the toe back in again and see what happens. So, like, I mean, you spent some time over in the club. Like, I mean, they absolutely idolise the man, right?
Yeah. I would have been there. It was a Good Friday, funnily enough. At the time, after the consortium had been out there, Niall Quinn met me very generously on basically what was a day off for the club. They were playing Manchester United that weekend. He walked me around the club, around the stands, met several staff. I walked around the city. I spoke to people in shops. Got a real feel for at that time, it was the Irishness of Sunderland. And obviously Keane's part in that. Wow, the warmth for Niall Quinn there, by the way, too, is certainly at that time was huge. But there was a huge, the conversation that's ongoing at the minute about why players won't go to Newcastle. People don't tend to want to go to that part of the world. So when people show them some love and they achieve some success, and the umbilical cord that's there between the likes of the football club in Newcastle and the city, and the football club in Sunderland and the city, is a real tangible thing. And when they're going well, it does have a positive economic and general uplift on the city as well. But yeah, huge love for him. As I said, I do think a big part of it is that they know that nobody really cares about them, and that is deep rooted, and it's at government level and every other aspect that you can possibly think about. So I do think that there will be a thirst, there's a nostalgia about it as well. And let's call a spade a spade. It's kind of 15 years ago. People who would have been in their 20s at that point or have moved on with life now, and they're yearning for a time that they bring us the glory days of Roy Keane. And who knows whether he can replicate that. Quite possibly not, I'd say, is probably the reasoned guess. But I'd say there's a bit of a nostalgia yearn about it as well.
And there is about some other managers as well. Like, Roy Keane is of significant profile, therefore he just gets scrutinised a little bit more than everybody else. I mean, if Roy Keane got a Premier League job, it would be astonishing. That would be an absolutely crazy story. If he got one in the Championship, it would raise eyebrows as well. And I guess that's the ambition for him, to become a Championship manager over the next little while. So I'm not sure. We'll just have to see. The nostalgia thing if that's what it's based on, then I mean they're doomed to fail. You'd like to think that Sutherland have a lot more to give, and or they think that Roy Keane has a lot more to give. It'd be interesting to see how the interview actually plays out, and what Roy Keane is actually offering as a manager right now, because what we hear about these days is managers coming in with PowerPoint presentations and spreadsheets. Is Roy Keane coming in with a USB stick or a little Google Drive link and saying, click that there, lads, there's my football philosophy?
Yeah, like I do think, look, if you're the Sunderland owners or you're any club owner, and this predates Gabby Agbonlahor's comments, because that theory has been out there for a long time that he expects too much of players. He expects them all to be at his level. But you're absolutely certain that if I'm involved in that process, I'm saying to him, listen, Gabby Agbonlahor has said this stuff. It's out there. What's your take on that? Like, he's got to address it, is the thing. Look, we'll see. I don't know. I wouldn't be as convinced that he. I think he has to do it. I think he owes it to himself. I think it's an itch that he absolutely has to scratch somewhere, and if he got to do it as low reaches of League One, then he's got to do it. But I wouldn't be as convinced that he can actually make a success of it. As I said, it's a 12-14 months thing at best either way, and we shall watch with interest. I'm sure there'll be more developments on that over the coming days as well. You saw the team out yesterday, I presume. What's your thoughts on the Ireland 23?
I guess Mac Hansen is the big story, and that is the story over here as well. Mac Hansen kind of leading the headlines with regards to the Welsh angle on things. I might just give you a sample of what they're going with on the back pages of the two main newspapers here. They're going with the Josh Adams angle on their theme. Josh Contrive, a central figure. That's Wayne Pivak, who did a press conference yesterday. That is the Western Mail. The South Wales Echo. Adams can thrive in a central role. So that's certainly the thing that's sticking out to them. But I mean, if you're looking at an Ireland team, the biggest talking point is certainly Mac Hansen, because some of the other decisions were kind of taken out of the coach's hands. Like, I think for the last couple of weeks we were saying, at long last, we finally have 3 fit centres. And I know he said yesterday that Henshaw is ready to go, but he's not. Like, I mean, he's not fully fit. So we've got to wait another week for all those 3 to be fully fit before we can actually get to a point of seeing, is Aki going to slip in and actually take that number 12 jersey. So yeah, it's Hansen. Isn't it a good Connacht man like yourself? Surely is bursting with pride to see another one of your boys getting into the team.
There's a 10-minute response to that I won't bore people with, Eoin, but look, it is a good time to be having a look around, and obviously some of it is his hand has been forced. I know there's some chat this morning about why Robert Balogun hasn't been included, and you would certainly scratch your head a little bit about that one and say maybe he deserved it. Mac Hansen does look like a prospect in a way that I know it's written about it, I think in the Mail this morning, about calling out the likes of Michael Bent and Matt Mostyn from years ago, and you would hope that he's not of that variety, Mac Hansen, that he's actually, he looks as if, and I've seen him up close in action. I was at the Connacht Ulster game with the Aviva a few months ago, and he is a prospect. This guy's a player. So we'll see this weekend. You couldn't be going into, like, this is an absolute test. We saw what happened with James Lowe obviously over the early games of his international career. You're going right into the frying pan of this one. So we shall see on that, and as I mentioned, Eoin has got lots coming for us from Cardiff over the course of the morning and right across the day. And a reminder as well that at 7:53 on this Friday morning, OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here is a bit of a flavour of what's coming up for you between now and 10 AM this morning. We are going to be getting a bit more from Eoin in a few minutes. He was at the darts last night. We're going to have some of his reaction from that in just a little bit. Ross Harries, a Welsh journalist, will be talking us through what's going on across the back pages of the Welsh newspapers today, give a bit of flavour about what they're saying ahead of the game at the weekend. Quick Picks is back. It returned last weekend, and we'll have week 2's picks. I think Aisling is top of the pile, but Tommy has come up with some weird formula by which you can even it all out over the course of the next few weeks. Quick Picks 8:10. Eoin's been talking, as he mentioned, with Eddie Butler. That's coming your way at 9:25 this morning. Coach Pat Fitzgerald of the Northwestern Wildcats, they're coming to Dublin next August to take on Nebraska in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, and Coach Pat Fitzgerald, he is a big deal, and he's live in studio with us this morning at 9:15, and Alan Quinlan will further preview that Ireland-Wales game, and looking ahead as well to the weekend of Six Nations action for you at 9:05 this morning. John Giles talking to Richie last night, I should say, as well, from 9:30 this morning. So that is what is coming your way. By the way, I do want to remind you as well, also very exciting news on OTB AM this week. Very exciting. We've got another final pair of tickets to give away this morning at OTB AM to Ireland against Wales at the Aviva Stadium tomorrow afternoon. It's going to be an absolute belter, isn't it? It's all with thanks to Aldi, official fresh food partner to Irish Rugby. This week they've launched Play With Your Food with the RFU. New research showing that over 40% of Irish kids don't eat fruit and vegetables every day. Play With Your Food encourages kids to think differently about how they consume that good fruit and veg. So enter our competition to be in with the chance of winning a pair of tickets to Ireland Wales. You just have to do the following. Follow us on TikTok. There's our page. _the_ball is our handle there. You can head along and check that out. You can like any one of our TikTok videos and comment with our secret word so that we know that you've entered. And the secret word this morning is Rog. Simple as that for the weekend that's in it. ROG. And we're going to pick a random winner later today. We'll get those tickets out to you ahead of the game tomorrow. Just make sure that you're following us on the OTB TikTok account. If you're not following us, you can't win, and we won't be able to PM you with the details of that unless you are following us. So that's all of that. We'll give you a reminder as well of that a little bit later on. But actually, Eoin, we're going to go back on your dart stuff last night. Full video. This is going to be available on the OTB social channels across the day. Make sure you go and check that out later on. But here is how Eoin got on at the darts in Cardiff last night.
Sports making all that noise everywhere we go.
Come on, Quinlan. Come on, Gezzy. Do it for the academy, buddy. Come on. Shock attack, Judge. Shock attack.
We won. We are no shame. We cook where we want.
First shock attack in Wales, and the poor bastard can't even eat me.
Is there a specific shark you're dressed up as tonight?
Whatever shark is eating me, my brother. And at the end of the day, it's nice to have the darts in Wales instead of England. So you can stick your chariots up your ass. You can stick your chariots up your ass. You can stick your chariot. Stick your chariot. Stick your chariot up your ass. Oi, oi, oi. I'm a Merthyr Tydfil boy originally.
Do you watch the rugby?
Oh, damn straight. Darts and rugby all the way. I can't.
So the big game this weekend, Ireland against Wales. Who do you think is going to get the job done?
To be honest with you, being a Welshman, I reckon Ireland might do us at the last end, to be honest with you. Because the way that the Welsh team is going through, I think it's some youngsters coming through and they need players. I don't think we're going to have a Six Nations, truth be told, as a Welshman. I don't think we're going to have a Six Nations. We ain't going to retain a title, because we're having some youngsters coming through. But I'm just a fat man who don't know nothing, apparently. But I'm telling you straight, Ireland or England are going to win the Six Nations.
I've never seen a shark talk so much sense about rugby.
Oh, shark attack. Aye. This was meant to be a Christmas swim, but the Christmas swim got cancelled.
I'm telling it straight. What is it about Welsh people and just telling it like it is, on?
Yeah, I don't know. They can really cut through all the nonsense and tell it like it is. So yeah, getting a lot of truth bombs there. A couple of Welsh people who aren't even fully confident that they're going to do the job this weekend.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's plenty more of that good stuff over the course of the day as well. That was on at the darts last night. Gezzy, go on, Gezzy. You got to hand it out to the Welsh, to be fair to them, to do a good nickname. Right, we've lots to come, as I mentioned a bit earlier on. We're going to be getting into much more detail in the rugby a little later on with Alan Quinlan, host of the Red 78, and of other notoriety as well, and plenty more besides as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Do please keep your comments coming into us, whether it's about the rugby, Roy Keane's return, possible return to football management, any thoughts on the Welsh, of course, we want to hear on that. Anything else that's tickles your fancy this weekend in relation to sport or anything else besides, please do get them into us. It is coming up on 8 o'clock. You're watching OTB AM and we're with you until 10 this morning. Let's now hear, Eoin has been talking to BBC journalist Ross Harries. It's all about the what's happening to the Welsh newspapers. Take a look.
Just looking at some of the papers here, disgraceful stories on the front of the Western Mail and the South Wales Echo. Stadium bars to close early in Six Nations is this morning's headline on the Western Mail. We'll come back to yesterday's Echo preview, and this morning's South Wales Echo is Welsh rugby new dry half, and I'm not sure. Are you going to go to a game ever again, Ross? I mean, the alcohol percentage has been dropped from 5% to 4.3%. This is a disgrace.
Big news. It was a huge story last night, all over the Welsh news. It's been coming. I think the WO have experimented with a couple of other solutions. There was a sort of no alcohol family zone, I think during the 2020 Six Nations. Not sure how successful that was proved to be. But there has been this kind of growing concern that the stadium's becoming an unpleasant place to go for a lot of hardcore rugby fans. There's always been this divide, between the hardcore rugby fan and the event goer. And there are some, I think it's a minority, but some more snobbish Welsh fans who don't like the daffodil hats and the leeks pinned to the lapel, and the people who turn up once a year to watch Wales and the Six Nations who don't go and watch their club or the regions. I've got no issue with that. That's what makes the stadium the size and the colourful atmospheric place it is. And without those people, you get half full, quarter full stadiums. So I think there's a place for everyone there. And I'm not particularly snobbish about that. But as I say, there has been this growing concern that more drunk people are going and people aren't paying attention to the game. They're just getting hammered, and occasional fights break out and occasional arguments break out. And there was that awful story in the autumn about a child that was vomited on by a drunk fan, and that's dreadful. And if that was my child, I would be absolutely fuming. But I think we sometimes have to be a bit careful not to be too hysterical and assume that that's happening in every row, in every stand. There's got to be a bit of perspective to this. But it is a concern. It's made the news, and it's an ongoing thing. So let's see if this makes a difference. I suspect people might just get more drinks when they go to the bar to account for that.
That is certainly one way around it, for sure. Yeah, that's and what's is that 8.6% technically with 2 pints? And I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, it does. If you catastrophize it too much, you just have this image of the Principality Stadium full of middle-aged men projectile vomiting on the nearest available child, which is, let's face it, a little bit funny. So, these things sometimes get blown out of proportion. Like on the back pages, which is where we probably should be starting. You got Johnny Sexton's quotes being carried here in Wales. Sexton's stress warning for Irish. That's the back of the South Wales Echo, and then the back of the Western Mail. We must deal with stress of playing Pivek's Wales. So Ireland skipper Johnny Sexton has warned his side to deal with the stress of playing his side, and he's noticed how Pivek has changed Wales' style since taking over from Gatland, and says that they'll need to deal with the attacking system that can stress you. Is that an accurate representation of Wales over the last little while?
Yeah, I think so. Wayne Pivak is probably a more cerebral coach than Warren Gatland, and you'll know that from watching him, when he's in charge of the Scarlets. And I always think back to that 2017 final against Munster, where Munster were heavily fancied at the Aviva Stadium. They had a bigger pack, and people, I think, thought it was going to be a bit of a grind. And it even was raining on the morning of that game, I remember, which would have favoured Munster even more. But the Scarlets came out and played that brand of rugby, which just blew Munster off the park, and they weren't afraid to play and to go wide early. And I think it kind of almost revolutionised the way we thought about rugby again in Wales. And Wayne Pivak's definitely trying to take that approach to Wales, but as he always said with the Scarlets, it took him 2 or 3 seasons to almost recalibrate the way those players thought about playing. And some players, they didn't make the grade, and you saw certain players being cast aside early in his tenure. And people often forget as well, they lost the first 3 games in a row of that championship winning season. So it was a work in progress, and I think we're seeing that with Wales. So you get, signs of a fairly swift progress, and then maybe a bit of a dip, as we saw in the Autumn Nations Cup 2020, where things just didn't go remotely Wales' way. And then in the championship last season, we started to see the fruits of it again. And you see locks like Alan Wynne-Jones and Jake Baldwin, who's still here, standing in the wide channels, which you'd never have seen before, utilising forwards like that in those 15-metre tram lines. So I think there's definitely an ambition. Stephen Jones is his trusty lieutenant who was with him at the Scarlets. He's a very, an architect of attacking rugby. But as you know, you can only do that with a steady supply of ball. And if the defence is up in your face, as Ireland's usually is, then all that ambition can can be squashed. So it's a balance. I think Sexton's being very diplomatic, playing at Wales' strengths. Those strengths exist. It's just whether or not we'll be able to see them in action at a vociferous Aviva Stadium against an Island side that are clearly just absolutely overloaded with ambition right now.
There's certainly a lot of positivity around the team. I think there's also a little bit of caution because of what happened last year. It's interesting though, like looking at Sexton, and I guess that the conversation around Sexton in Ireland is constantly how many more years does he have left, and all of a sudden he comes back and plays another couple of years and he's still at that level, and it's just rinse and repeat with that. Is that the exact same conversation that you guys have around Alan Wynne-Jones? Because I've certainly picked up on a bit of it in the papers, that it's like they hark back to moments a couple of years ago where everyone thought he was done. It was the Rugby World Cup. It was reported in the Echo in the Six Nations preview that a journalist, I think they probably pointed to it being a non-Welsh journalist, asked Alan Wynne-Jones before the semi-final, how does it feel that your last game is going to be against like in a World Cup semi-final? How does that feel? Before they actually played it, which didn't go down too well. But again, a couple of years later, we're still here, and while injured, he's still playing. So is it identical to the Sexton situation, where it's like stop writing this guy off, basically? Definitely.
They're a similar age, similar talismanic status, and there just seems to be a sense in Wales that as long as Alan Wynne's around, everything will be all right. So when it was announced that he was going to miss the tournament, we already had the likes of Justin Tipuric on the sidelines, Faletau missing a good chunk of it as well, Josh Navidi not there, a lot of those talismanic forwards, Lions, but he was considered the biggest miss of all. I think he's 36 now, same age as Johnny Sexton, right? So I think Wales has to start considering a future without him. He made that miraculous comeback for the Lions, which was straight out of the Alan Wynne copybook. Completely rule him out, and then all of a sudden, people are talking about him being ready for the first test, and you're like, what? How on earth could that happen? So don't be surprised. Don't be remotely surprised if he pops up in round 3 of the Six Nations. And he's the kind of guy that doesn't seem to need a run of games. I mean, that might change the older he's getting now, but he's had injury layoffs before, and then he seems to come back at 9 out of 10. He doesn't take 3 or 4 games to rediscover his rhythm. But time is against him. And I think, Wales as a nation sometimes has a tendency to cling on to their heroes. Warren Gatland was the most ruthless selector I think Wales have ever had. Adam Jones, gone. Mike Phillips, gone. Jamie Roberts, stranded on 94 caps. Sentiment did not come into his selection at all. And I wonder if Warren Gatland was still here, might he have thought, do you know what? We need to think for the future. We need to groom the next Alan Wynne-Jones. It's time to move him on. I think Wayne Pivac is holding on to him because of that status he holds and because of all the other injuries. You've got to keep him involved. You've got to keep him in camp, even if it's just as a voice of experience, someone to drag these youngsters through to the next generation. I can see him going into coaching. Yeah. So it may just be a very sensible move to keep him in camp and make that transition as smooth as possible.
Yeah, straight in with the Welsh camp.
It's happened, isn't it? It happened with Sam Warburton. Didn't work out with Sam. It wasn't for him. But he went straight into national coaching, without going through the usual route of getting his badges. Gethin Jenkins is another. He'd had a bit more experience coaching at Cardiff, but he was thrust into the role when Byron Hayward left. So Wales and the Pivac administration doesn't seem concerned about whether they have to serve an apprenticeship at regional level or maybe in another country. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Alan Wynne was kind of co-opted into that coaching setup.
Well, what's going to be interesting over the course of the next little while is, I suppose Six Nations is often hampered by the weather, but the trend in the Northern Hemisphere has been towards a really attractive style of rugby. And I guess what Andy Farrell has proved with Ireland is that they can do that over the next little while. That would be the intention with Pivac, obviously, with Wales. Andy Dunn was on Monday Night Rugby with us this week, kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, well, Schmidt's in with the All Blacks now, so wait for them to, put it up the jumper and win the next World Cup that way. How do you see the Six Nations developing stylistically over the next little while? Are we in for a real treat if you're a neutral bystander?
I think it has to go in that direction. We saw glimpses of New England in the autumn. I remember speaking to Wayne before the last Six Nations, and while he had the utmost respect for the achievements of his predecessor, Warren Gatland, the stats don't lie, and Wales's record against the Southern Hemisphere Big Three was pitiful. The wins were very sporadic. You just haven't been the All Blacks since 1953 when TV was still black and white. The Wallabies beat Wales 10 times in a row under Warren Gatland. Admittedly, most of them were agonising last-minute defeats by a point or a couple of points. South Africa, a little bit different, because Wales and the Warren Gatland played a similar type of game to South Africa. But what Pivac said from the very beginning was, you can't consistently beat the Southern Hemisphere teams playing that way. Therefore, you can't win a World Cup, because you'll face at least one of them, probably two or three, en route to a final. So I think Wayne Pivac is determined to expand the way Wales play, and as you say, it's a kind of trend in the game at the moment as well. Smaller players lighter on their feet, a commitment to playing more rugby. These tweaks in the laws have helped. I think we haven't seen loads of 50-22s, but they're creeping into the game. It is making defences sit a little bit further back, creating a bit more space. Ireland under Farrell, they're very physical, very abrasive, but a little less prescribed than Joe Schmidt. And France.
A lot less prescribed, I would say.
Prescribed. I've been polite. And France, I know we're all getting excited about France. I worked on the the coverage of the France-New Zealand game in the autumn, and it was just phenomenal. It was one of those. I think we had half an hour off air, but because it was on Amazon Prime, we could just extend that because unlike when you're on the BBC, Gardeners World isn't coming up next. You don't have to meet your time slot. So it was one of those ones where the producers just came through and said, "I'm ripping up the running order. Let's just milk this. Let's chat." We had Serge Betson with us, Nick Evans, and it was just an absolute pleasure. We were back and forth to Paris, bringing all the interviews in, and it was just a brilliant rugby occasion. The kind of thing all us neutrals crave. Untermack running from his own try line, just phenomenal. So I think Galtier has instilled that Gallic elan back into the French game, and they're the favourites for obvious reasons. So yeah, in answer to your question, I hope, as the sun peeks out from behind the clouds here in North Cardiff, that we could be in for an absolute treat. We need it, don't we? After the last couple of years of misery and despair, not in rugby, just in the world at large.
Is it going to happen this weekend? 6-1 was the prices we saw last week. You're surely putting money on that, are you? From a Welsh perspective?
I'm not a gambling man, Eoin. I like to look at the odds, just to inform my own opinions. But I just look at the provinces, and I know it doesn't always translate. So in the same way that the Welsh regional form doesn't always translate into brilliant national form, the amazing Irish provincial form doesn't always translate into test form.
You're forgetting the Cardiff Blues and their amazing win against Leinster last week.
Cardiff Rugby, I should correct.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting caught up here in 2013.
Yeah, it's very political. It was exactly 28-0 against Toulouse. You can't fault that, can you? Amazing result. Away as well. So, yeah, I just look at... I know some of those scorelines were skewed, but those consecutive weekends where Leinster put 80 on Montpellier and then 60 on Bath, and I look at that, the personnel in that Leinster side and the amount of overlap with the Irish side. I look at the coaching staff. It pains me to say it, but I think if Wales get within 2 scores, it'll probably be a moral victory of sorts.
Right. Okay. So if you had to put a scoreline on it?
I would probably say Ireland by 12.
I think that is around what the bookies are saying as well. Ross, it's been great catching up with you. Apologies for my colleague back in Dublin for writing off Wales. I mean, an absolute disgrace. Do you have any message to them before we go? The shock jocks back in Dublin?
Whatever happened to the Celtic Brotherhood is what I'd like to say. We used to have the Ireland players' backs, and we hoped you had ours. Clearly not the case anymore. So we'll see you in Dublin on Saturday. But Guinness all round, whatever the result is, it? Or Murphy's?
Well, don't be drinking the 5% Heineken because it causes you to vomit everywhere, apparently. So we'll see you there. Ross Harris of a load of different things. Check out his work. You can check him out on Twitter. You'll see him on TV very shortly. Indeed, I presume you're working around the game on Saturday. Are you?
I'm not actually on Saturday. I'm watching it as a punter. Right. So I'll be enjoying myself without all the pressure of work that comes with it.
Stuff. Well, enjoy that, and thanks a million for sitting down for a chat today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The quote was as impressive as anything, and quite the prediction. 12 points from the Wales point of view. That makes me nervous. Is the main thought I have out of that. In conversation with Ross Harries there at the BBC, and as he said himself, plenty of others as well. Full version of that going to be available up on the OTB Rugby podcast feed shortly. Our YouTube channel as well. It's also where you find Eoin's interview with Eddie Butler that we're going to bring you a little bit later on today, and much more as well. So pack show coming up. Coach Pat Fitzgerald, he's a big deal. He's the Northwestern Wildcats head coach, football head coach, and he's going to be along with us in just a little bit live in studio. Alan Quinlan, Six Nations preview, back after these with our GAA Quick Picks.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Sport is so fickle, and you know this more than anyone, Quinny. Like, you know, you're either on top of the world or you're down in the doldrums.
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
Him going back to Japan was probably more acceptable for people, but him going to bat might frustrate a few people, disappoint a few people.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the Rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Off the ball's the best, number one.
It's the GOAT of sports apps.
Talk about the greatest of all time. Nathan, you know Big Joe. Big Joe's the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. We know it.
So
every single time. Yes. Yes.
It's tough going. It's tough for my ego. I'm going to say I'm the Djokovic of this scenario.
I love it. Love it.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Download the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, it's gone at 8:15. You're watching OTB AM, and we're delighted to have you along with us this morning, wherever it is you're at. Do keep your comments coming into us. Reminder, by the way, such an exciting competition for you this morning. Another pair of tickets to give away this morning on OTB AM to Ireland against Wales in the Aviva tomorrow afternoon. We've been talking about it all morning. We'll continue to do so over the course of the day, and it's all with thanks to Aldi, official fresh food partner to Irish Rugby. And this week they've launched Play With Your Food in association with the IRFU. New research showing that over 40% of Irish kids don't eat fruit and veg every day. Play With Your Food encourages kids to think differently about how they consume that good stuff with the fruit and veg, and enter our competition just beyond the chance of winning that pair of tickets to Ireland against Wales. Just do the following. Head along to TikTok is your number one port of call. Follow us on TikTok, _the_ball. That's our handle. Like any one of our TikTok videos and comment on one of them with our secret word so that we know that you've entered. And that secret word is ROG, R-O-G. And we're going to pick a random winner later today. Get those tickets out to you to make sure that you're there at the game tomorrow. And by the way, just make sure that you're following us, because if you ain't, we can send you a PM to let you know that you've won those tickets. So that is all with thanks to Aldi. And at coming up on 8:20 on this Friday morning, it's time for GAA Quick Picks.
Some of these critics, these pundits,
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
I'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
All right, time for the quick picks, and we're coming to you from all over the planet this morning. And I can let you know that after week one, that I don't know, Tommy, you've come up with some sort of a weird dynamic for how this is all going to pan out over the next 7 or 8 weeks. It is all going to level itself out, right? Is what you're saying. I'm not going to get 100%. Shafted by having not been here last week.
100%. Yeah, we're all going to have a rest week or two, and we're all going to get an opportunity to embarrass ourselves like we did last week. A very low hit rate across the board.
Yeah, well, I think Will was maybe the main person that embarrassed himself last week. What happened to you, Will?
Got too cocky. He was the champion last year and he got too cocky.
Yeah, lads, as the band Yaz once sang, the only way is up from here. I'm not sure exactly how this algorithm is going to work out with rest weeks and so on to see who's going to win. I see no hurling picks for weekend one of the hurling league as well. So I'm not sure if Tommy is trying to do some kind of intentional sabotage of the quick picks for the season by at this early stage putting in Division 4 Football League games and not a sign of the hurling league for this week.
I just said I'd level it off for this week, keep it similar to last week, and then next week. You got to work with the algorithm, Will. I don't know if we have the table, but Aisling is joint top on 4 points. She got 4 picks right. She got Galway, Roscommon, Antrim and Cavan. Eoin is joint top on 4 points. He called Galway, Roscommon, Antrim and Cavan. I'm joint top on 4 points. I called Galway, Antrim, Roscommon and Cavan. And Will is at the bottom of the table on 2 points. He only called Roscommon and Cavan. So, Eoin, I think we were really hurt by the draws. That really got us, and it didn't look great. And even though we talked up Armagh, a full slate of calls for Dublin to beat Armagh.
I mean, they were in Croke Park. They won the All Ireland 2 years ago. They got to an All Ireland semi-final last year. Armagh didn't. It wasn't an overly outrageous shout. They got upset. That's what happens. I mean, it's like do people like I saw somebody screenshotting it. And posting it towards us. Do people screenshot like bookies odds as well when an upset happens all the time and post them online? Because that's just like what happened. It's nothing outrageous whatsoever. I mean, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, Tommy.
Yeah, no, I'd wonder, like, whatever about posting online, I wonder, have we made any dressing room walls yet?
Probably not.
Okay,
I mean,
we know we made it.
I would say there's no chance at all. Let's get into what's going on this week and who can sort of redeem themselves. And you mentioned everybody going against Armagh last week. Let's see which way we're going with Kerry Dublin to begin with. And I don't know if you can see this, but this does not bode well for you at all. Everybody is going for Kerry. Lead the way, Eoin. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking kind of the same as that last week. If you take into account both teams' form, they're both not playing well if you want to just base it on 1 week. But Kerry are playing less bad than Dublin on the evidence of last week. Kerry were at home last week, or Dublin were at home last week, Kerry were away last week and Kerry got a better result. Arguably, though, Armagh are better than Kildare. So if you're trying to put that jigsaw form together, I think Kerry edges it. Then you throw in the Tralee factor on top of that, and the fact that it is the league. And I think that Dublin have struggled against Kerry in the league relative to the championship over the last 5-6 years. So I think it points towards a Kerry win on that front. But I wouldn't be saying it with any great confidence. In fact, I think that the Tralee environs will suit this Dublin team better than the Croke Park size of the pitch last week. I mean, if you watched the Armagh game, Adrian, which I'm sure you did, you'll have seen them knifing through them as a result of the massive open spaces in Croke Park. They won't have that. Kerry won't have that luxury this week. But the thing is, I'm not sure if that'll matter because Kerry are maybe not playing as expansively as they were over the last couple of seasons. They've possibly reined it in a little bit necessarily. So I think it'll be a tight game, but I think Kerry are going to win on maybe like a 13 points to 11 scoreline or something like that.
Yeah, I'm taking that as an indication of how he actually feels what's going to happen later in the year. Tommy, what's your rationale on this?
Yeah, I just think we talked about Croke Park, and no one talks about Croke Park there last week and the impact we thought that could have had. Newbridge was a tough enough spot for anyone to go, and I think that made a big difference to the Kerry result last week. I think Kerry are probably pretty happy about where they're at. I think not losing that weekend also helped that they actually got a draw. That meant that there wasn't that much of a disaster kind of bells ringing around the county last week. So they've been able to kind of reassess and look at what they did right and what they did wrong. The only caveat to this is, if Jack O'Connor looks at what happened to Tommy Conroy this week with his injury and the Sigerson Cup and the amount of games that are happening, and Jack O'Connor sits down and says, do you know what? We might need David Clifford a little later in the year. So we're going to rest David Clifford this weekend. Now, for a sold-out crowd down there, they'll be disappointed not to see one of the marquee players in the game. But when you look at what's happened in over the last number of years, and Marsh Brosnan put out a stat there yesterday of players getting injured, key players getting injured in January in around this time when they're playing college football and league football, and some of it feels a bit needless, like Tommy Conroy played a full game at the weekend, 48 hours later. I'm not saying it's the direct reason for what happened, but he's playing on 2 very heavy pitches and the cruciate gets done. So
well, I'm coming to you in a second in our match run, but Tommy, I want to stop you there because I've never seen somebody look so shifty when you've been talking about David Clifford possibly sitting out this weekend. Owen, what is going through that mind of yours?
I think Jack O'Connor has already proved this year that player welfare can sometimes be put it to one side for the greater good of the team. I mean, beating Tipperary with Tony Brosnan and Jack Savage's necessary inclusions, they wouldn't have won that game without them. Proved that he's willing to go to any length. So is he willing to play David Clifford twice in a week? He absolutely is. Is that paranoia, Tommy, from the manager's standpoint, where if you start thinking about whether or not your player is going to do his cruise shit? Like, I mean, I accept that there's a complete over workload, but like, do we also need to be a little bit careful in terms of diagnosing why a cruise shit was done? Without getting into a grey area here. Like, I mean, the workload is obviously terrible, and like your body is put into a very vulnerable position, and this shouldn't be happening. Players should not be playing in 1 week. But I think to all of a sudden make this leap between workload and lads being doing their cruise, I think that's a prediction that is kind of an outlandish prediction, is it not?
I don't know if it's that outlandish. It's hard to get a proper correlation on it. But just to read you what Morris Brosnan's tweet was yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but February 16, 5 games in 16 days. Jack McCaffrey pulls his hamstring. Paul Mannion does his quad. That same year in 2016, Tony Kelly and Sean Finn played Munster League in Fitzgibbon. They did their ankle ligaments in their cruciate within a few days of each other. February 2018, David Clifford does his hamstring after playing 4 games in 10 days. This will be his 3rd game in a week, like. Do you know, they're heavy pitches. It's tough. I don't want to be talking about this as if players are going to get injury. It's the last thing I want to see. But maybe it might be the smart move to say, the lads of Sigerson, there's 10 days left to go. This brilliant competition. Maybe let's just give them a bit of space here. Yeah. You know, we know there's so many problems with the GAA calendar, and there's no getting away from that. But while those problems exist, and that competition is happening, just let them play Sigerson.
And there's plenty of, like, what we're alluding to is the fact that there's so much science there now and data, and they'll be making that decision based on a lot of numbers.
They will, of course. Last one on that. Kerry ended up possibly losing that All-Ireland last year, or their chance a crack at an All-Ireland final, because David Clifford got injured and they didn't have him for extra time. So it'd be I don't know what you think it is like, but it'd be no harm those Kerry forwards putting their hand up and saying, if David Clifford isn't here for a game, or isn't around, or he gets suspended, or he's not fully fit for a game, we're able to do that job. So it's not like Kerry, are lacking in Killian Spillane, Paul Ganey, anyone else that, Tony Brosnan's obviously, I think he's finished 6th. Are they out? Maybe they're still in it, are they?
I think it'd be a different scenario, Tommy, if it wasn't Dublin at home in the second round of the league where Kerry are looking to get a victory. I think there's no doubt that David Clifford will play this weekend. Like, I'd be shocked if they left him out. And the thing is, when it comes to muscle injuries, and I take Morris Brosnan's point entirely, that there's too much workload on elite players at this time of year because of the way that the competitions overlap. And with the league starting that little bit earlier as well, it feels like there's even more of an overlap with the Sigerson. But the thing is that David Clifford goes in very bravely for his second goal. As people probably saw the video during the week, he could easily have taken an impact injury there playing for his college, as opposed to picking up a muscle strain while playing for Kerry this weekend. And I think he came off with a few minutes to go. Ultimately, it's about how his workload is probably managed outside of the games. Like, if he's not touched the ball, or he's just been resting up since the game midweek, he's probably good to go for this weekend. And hopefully, just as a neutral, we actually get to see David Clifford, because I fully expected this game was going to be a top of the table clash. Both teams winning last weekend. Alas, the results didn't go that way. But maybe for Dublin, particularly with the nature of the performance last week, and I will talk about Armagh in a moment, it puts that little bit of extra pressure on them going down to Tralee. If they're beaten 2 weeks in a row, Dublin are genuinely in a relegation battle already.
Yeah, it does big time. We were talking about dressing room walls earlier on, and you'd be certain that that's going to be part of the Dublin prep this week as well. We'll lead us out in Armagh against Tyrone here. Let's have a look and see what way everybody's going on this, on the basis of what we were saying earlier on. Armagh versus Tyrone, a draw, say Will and Adrian. I definitely didn't say draw there. Eoin is going for Tyrone.
Did you not?
Tommy says Armagh. No, I'll find out what I did say, because I can't quite remember. But Will, you're going for a draw. Go on. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I wish I'd stuck with my guns last week for a draw between Monaghan and Tyrone. I was edging towards that way and thought we always tend to go for wins here rather than going for draws because of the nature of the quick picks. But probably should have opted for a draw last week. I think this one's going to be really close. Was so impressed by Armagh last week. Albeit Dublin played into their hands somewhat with some of the sloppy play, particularly when we look back at the goal where Dublin make the most uncharacteristic of decisions to just try and put a 50-50 ball into the 45 and they get turned over on the counter-attack. But Armagh were really good throughout the game. Like, it was a most impressive victory. Tyrone, who we all had somewhat of doubts about coming back from the holiday, not showing great form in the pre-season. And then next thing, the McKenna Cup form was put to one side. And when it came to an arm wrestle against Monaghan last week, they had enough to get a draw and get a point out of it. I think similarly, this one is going to be so closely fought. Pretty much, to not make it sound like a cliche, but because we've got all these Ulster matches in Division 1, and looking back to last week, it was no great surprise in the end that we had draws with the way that these teams are set up and given how close the games tend to be between them. So I think Armagh might just kick on, get to 3 points by taking a point from the All-Ireland champions. And again, I think Tyrone are going to be very hard to beat this week.
Will rationalising sitting on the fence. Thanks for that, Will. Armagh was who I actually went for there. You'll never find me going for a draw like Will there. I mean, you might occasionally, but for the minute, let's just say that. And that's based on last weekend. And like maybe there is a bit of a hangover for Tyrone there, and that's kind of what I'm banking on from that game.
Like that, we might have to just check and see what your message to Joseph Conroy was.
Do please check that. And I've just had a message from Joe to say that the email format came up weird. I mean, look at we're back to this. You know the way you changed the format last year, where I was like run away, going to win the thing hands down, and then you changed the format to scupper me. Same sort of thing going on. To be expected. Who was going for Tyrone here? This was the one outlier.
I'm going for Tyrone.
Go on.
I think almost Will touched on it there. The reason why I'm going for it is that everybody expected them to be relatively poor last week, and all of a sudden they were back a lot better than we thought they were. So there's another week of training under their belts. There's a situation obviously where, I don't know, this is like an early season marker for these Ulster teams. I think we saw that last week in the game between Tyrone and Monaghan, where it's like, yeah, the McKenna Cup matters, but it doesn't really. I mean, once these Ulster teams go toe-to-toe in the league, it is about the sort of pride of not giving your opponent an inch, because chances are these sides will come up against one another in the championship later on this summer. So I think Tyrone are going to be well up for it. I think that they're not hurting from the idea, but I think that they're expert at going into some sort of siege mentality. And I think that if you're talking about dressing room wall stuff, they might have put up in the dressing room wall the fact that they've never gone back-to-back. And I think that's a massive motivating factor for Duher this year. So I think Tyrone are in a lot better position than I thought they were a week ago, and I think they're going to win.
Monaghan Mayo, next up, let's take a look. What's everybody thinking? Let's see if I've got my actual prediction on this one. We have, and it's Monaghan across the board, Tommy. Your own county, of course. You're a Cavan man, sorry, yeah. Go on.
Yeah. Well, it depends it depends what day of the week it is. Monaghan are just a great league team. They really, really are. Obviously, they're a very good championship team too, but they're just such a difficult place to go to. They really put it up the All-Ireland champions last week. Possibly should have beaten them. And while I think Mayo are going to have a decent league, I feel like they caught Donegal because Donegal did what Donegal have done for the last 3 or 4 years. They let a lead slip that they shouldn't have done. And Mayo really didn't have a right to come back the way they did from 5 points down with a man down in that second half. And I just think Monaghan are going to let rip a little bit more this weekend. We're going to see a bit more of McCarron, who didn't score last week. And I have a feeling Monaghan are just going to get the job done.
Yeah. It could be a bad year for Mayo all around. The bad news keeps coming for them. We'll
I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a bad year for Mayo. It's shocking, brutal news, but
yeah,
I know. I just think Monaghan are going to have more for them this weekend. And Mayo will do well at home all league long.
Few games to get through here, not long to do it. So Donegal, Kildare. Let's see what the predictions. Donegal across the board. Well, you've committed yourself, so fair play. That's a start.
Yeah, look, Donegal will be sickened that they left a couple of points behind them last week with the way they played against Mayo. It's, again, penalties happen, you can miss them, but they should have been able to close the game out from there, particularly the hard work that they got through for most of the game in difficult conditions to get themselves into a winning position and then to get caught and end up with a draw. Will focus the minds, I think, for Donegal this week. And look, I think Kildare came back very impressively, a bit like Mayo, rescuing a point for themselves in their game against Kerry, but Donegal, tough nut to crack. I am backing the men from the Northwest to pick up 2 points here.
It's the easiest call, is it, of the bunch? Owen?
I'm not entirely sure. No, sorry, you're right. It is actually, because the rest of the Division 1 games are actually quite hard to call. So by default, it is the easiest one. There is no easy game to call. You could easily go for. There will probably be a draw or two here this week, and it's about deciding which one it's going to be. Like it is the fantastic situation of what we're in, and you can throw a blanket over a lot of these teams. And particularly if you look at the two teams that are how will I say this? Like would be over the last couple of years the weakest of the Division 1 teams. Not at the moment, but traditionally, like Armagh Kildare, who would have played Division 2 football not too long ago, for example. They seem to just be on the upward trajectory right now, and we still don't know where their ceiling is. So I'm loath to back against them, even though that's exactly what I've done this morning on the Quick Picks. But it feels that there is no gimme. There is no team that are just going to go down without a fight this year. And sure, everybody, with the exception of Dublin, are already off the mark with at least 1 point. So we're not going to have like a Meath a couple of years ago. Wasn't that the case, Tommy, where they lost every game?
No, I don't see Dublin losing every game. No, I think you're right, Owen. I think you're right. Can I just make a point, because I made a mistake there? Cam is pointing out to me that Mayo have no home league games this year, which is very true. And I said they have really good home form in the league. So I'm not saying Mayo are going to get relegated because they've no home league games. I just think Monaghan are going to get the job done at home this year. Sorry, Owen.
Every game Kildare play, you'll be backing against the opponent. That's the reality of their season this year in the league.
Well, if they win this week, Adrian.
Yeah. Huh?
If they win this week, it changes everything.
If my auntie, as Liam Brady would say.
Hello, we are predicting here, so the idea of if is pretty present here.
I'm just saying it's a big if, right? And I don't see it. I don't
know how big an if it is, really. I was so impressed with how Kildare were moving last week. Like Jimmy Hyland was sensational. When Kevin Feely came off the bench in the second half, they had such strength in the middle of the field. I do think Donegal are going to have too much from this weekend, but I have a feeling it's not going to be like Meath last year. It's not going to be like Westmeath a couple of years ago. Kildare are going to pick up a couple of wins, and they'll make a good go out of staying up.
You're not predicting it this week.
I think Dublin are going to Newbridge in 3 weeks. Like if Dublin lose at the weekend.
Let's cut this and put it up on TikTok in a couple of weeks' time. I'm not entertaining this conversation.
Look, Paddy Andrews started on the football pod in week 1. He's trying to get that game moved to Croke Park. Dublin will not like going to Newbridge. They won't.
We have,
especially if they lost.
You can save that kind of cliche for the football pod. Absolute guff.
Adrian hates Kildare.
What are you talking about? They won't.
No, I don't. They're like Westmeath would be. They're out of their depth at that level.
Clip that and put it on TikTok, Adrian.
Meath again. I'm by the way, I am told that some more of my predictions are also wrong, including the Westmeath Laois one, which should have been an indicator. But let's wander off down into Division 2 here. Meath against Roscommon. I'm going for the Rossies, as is Will, as is Owen, and of course the green-eyed boy is going for his own county. Will, lead us out here on Roscommon.
Yeah, Roscommon, despite some injuries they've brought into the league, were good against Cork last weekend. Meath were horrific for at least 45 minutes of that game against Galway last week. I thought maybe, even though with Meath's issues coming into the league, that there was going to be a kick in them and they'd go and play well. Last week they did not. I mean, a response will obviously be expected from the Royals, which I'm guessing is Tommy's logic when he thinks that Meath have got something in them against Roscommon this weekend. But I fancy the Rossies to be right up there for promotion, and in order to do so, they're going to beat Meath this weekend.
Go on.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, do I have a get out clause saying that my picks are wrong? Yeah, Will said that I'm expecting Meath to give a response this weekend. I am. Like, if there isn't a response, there is something wrong. Because while that result was horrific last week, and there's no point getting into excuses, we can mention the fact that Meath had more shots than Galway, which was just crazy. They're not that bad. They really aren't. Like, they played Division 1 football last year. They fell short against Kildare in the promotion hunt, which was a big blow. They had a real messy off season when there was, a move in some parts of county board level to get Andy McEntee out. The clubs went against the county executive board, and he ended up staying. But that has to hang over a camp, has to hang over the county in a way. And it was the worst possible start to the league. I don't think it can get any better. They're in Navan this weekend. I find Navan is always a good surface to play on, no matter the weather. So I think it's going to be good. Meath have to get their best players on the pitch, which means Jordan Morris has to start. It was no coincidence that they got a couple of scores when he came on. I don't know if you saw the highlights afterwards, but the first point he got was a brilliant score. So if Morris is playing, I'd expect Morris to put in a good performance. I'd expect Meath to be a good bit better this weekend. The Rossies still have a heap of players to come back. I don't think they'll be back this weekend. The players who did so well in club, with the Dailies, David Murray, the Murtas and Folias, I don't think they'll be back yet. And I'm just hoping that Meath gives something.
Yeah, David Murray, who in any other county would be David Murray. Is that?
I think it's Moraine was coming.
Yeah, I know they're absolutely above their station there. Right. Oh, and I was more than mildly distracted. What, are you getting kicked out of the Principality, or what's going on?
Yes, I am.
Are you really?
2 minutes. I'm on private property apparently.
Oh wow!
I'm standing outside. Like, I mean, let me show you this. Look, I'm on the road. Look, that's the road right there. And then this is private property by all accounts.
Wow.
So I need to leave.
Jesus, Jem O'Doherty hasn't got a patch on you.
Yeah. I will not be moved, is what I'm going to start.
Just go literally 50 yards to your right and go in front of the Arms Park, and you'll be on the public street. They can't stop you there.
Johnny Jobsworth will be back around the corner. Will he be turfing him out? Right. Well, let's keep this rocking then. Offaly against Derry. Let's flash the predictions up here. I actually went for Offaly on this one, and I'm not going to lie. All the rest of you have gone for Derry. All the rest of you gone for Derry, and I've gone for Offaly. And I'm not going to lie, having looked at it a little bit closer this morning, I wish that prediction that I put up there was right, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going with Offaly based on absolutely nothing other than the John Maughan impact. Because I mean, if you look at what went on last weekend, it's got to be Derry all the way. Will?
Yeah, I think so. Offaly faded really badly. I know Tommy was at the game, but conditions were with Offaly in the first half. Didn't get enough of a lead up against Clare, and then fell out of the game entirely. Lost the second half by 1-9 to 2 points, which is quite worrying. Particularly worrying will be the matchups against Derry for this weekend, where Offaly's first choice midfield are both abroad currently, and they got cleaned out in the Division 3 final at Croke Park last year around the middle of the park. I think that's what will happen again. Derry are going to come down to Tullamore on Sunday. I think they'll make the most of that platform around the middle. They've got such good players in that middle third, and that's where they were able to squeeze Offaly entirely in the Division 3 league final. I think the deficit probably won't be quite as large as the league final last year, but I still would fancy Derry by 4 or 5 points. And I think Derry have got a really good chance of back-to-back promotions as well.
I will say that Johnny Jobsworth, moving on, has actually improved the shot greatly. That's a brilliant shot selection with Cardiff Arms Park behind you. Beautiful.
Nice, thanks, Will.
Laois against Westmeath. I think mine is going to say Laois here, which is clearly absolutely not the way I'm going. I'm going Westmeath all day long. And unbelievably, Eoin is the only one that's with me. Will and Tommy, have you not learned your lesson from last year when I whooped the 3 when this prediction came up? What are you thinking, Tommy?
Well, Will, do you want to jump in here? Like, I think Billy Sheahan has got the motoring quite well, and I think he does. And Westmeath were blessed last week. You know, Wicklow had such a good start. They had a real good run of them, and they came back. And look, I just thought there was a couple of worrying signs there. They do have the second best player in the top 10 players.
Exactly.
In the bottom 10
Delighted
counties.
to see that, Tommy. So, yeah, fair play.
You know, Johnny Heslin may pull it out of the bag for them, but I just think
they're a better team than Laois. It's not, they don't need anything pulled out of the bag. They were slow start to last week. They're clearly, on the evidence of last year, a better team. Billy Sheahan has checked that himself, that and obviously they've had a huge turnaround of players as well. But
just going to say, Adrian, Billy Sheahan did a quick count. There was only 5 players involved last weekend who played the championship game in Tullamore last year, so that just goes to show the turnover of players. Like, I think the argument for Laois on this one is just purely based on the form the two teams have shown so far, where Westmeath played just 1 game in the O'Byrne Cup, and Jack Cooney admitted afterwards that played a huge part in Wicklow getting that start, where they had 2-4 scored very early in the game last week in Mullingar, but Westmeath were able to wrestle it back. I think the fact that Kevin Maguire could be missing this weekend, he went off injured last week, will be a bit of a concern if Evan O'Carroll is going to play in around the square. I don't think Westmeath necessarily have a good matchup in their defence to go in on him if Maguire is out. This one's going to be really close. Again, I was actually tempted to go for a draw here, but Laois have impressed me over the last 4 or 5 games that they played. And again, they went to Louth last week, got to a point at half-time where they were still in the game, came out with the switch over, scored 2 goals early in the second half. Gary Walsh has been playing really well. Just for that reason, I'm kind of just edging towards Laois, but not by much.
Class wins out, lads. That's all you need to know about that one. Tipperary against Leitrim, finally. Let's see which way everybody's going. It's Tipperary across the board, on.
I'd be a bit nervous of this, to be honest. I'm kind of as nervous of this one as I am actually of Roscommon against Meath. I think Tommy could be on something with the Meath bounce back this week, and I think not that it's a bounce back from Leitrim whatsoever. I think Tipperary is more of a case of a team that are on a downward spiral at the moment, and I think Leitrim potentially not on an upward spiral, but they're going to be are in contention potentially to get promoted this year. So a little bit concerned about this, to be honest. It was so bad from Tipperary last week, drawing with Waterford. This is a division that they absolutely need to get out of, so there is no room for them to find their way and to edge their way into this. So it's unbelievably high stakes for Tip. If they don't get a win this week, if they get beaten by Leitrim this week, it could well spell a second consecutive season in Division 4, because we know that Cavan are more than likely going to get promoted. So taking that into account, you like that is why I'm going for Tip on this occasion, because I think it's just too big a game. But I'm nervous. I'm worried about this one.
Okay, well look, quick picks in the can. A few edits to be made, I have to say. Let's formalise all this before games kick. I don't want any rancor next week when I'm top of the table. Fair play.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Alright, it's 8:45. We have coach Pat Fitzgerald of the Northwestern Wildcats standing by. He's going to come into studio very shortly, and we'll chat to him about the college football, obviously the Aer Lingus College Football Series coming to Dublin in August, and the Wildcats up against Nebraska, so we'll get stuck into all of that very shortly. But I think Eoin is still there. Are you there, Eoin?
I am, yeah.
We're going to hear from Eddie Butler. What can we expect?
So the first piece I think we're going to play is about the Welsh nationalism and the attachment with Welsh rugby and the pride that he had in wearing the shirt, and how that kind of differs, or what the similarities are between that and I guess how proud he is of his country outside of the rugby pitch as well.
What does it mean to be Welsh in this part of the country?
Well, it's a strange one because, in the great checklist of what being Welsh is, to be from Monmouthshire would rank pretty low. It's quite an anglicised county. You wouldn't get much Welsh language spoken here. For many years, it was almost described as Wales and Monmouthshire, which was a sort of clerical glitch for many years. But the truth is that it has always been a Welsh county. Gwent is one of the great kingdoms of ancient Wales, and so we are firmly planted in Wales, and but we are regarded with a degree of suspicion, I suppose, simply because it is a little bit more anglicised, and there are many commuters who live here who go over the bridge to Bristol to work, and it's Gloucestershire is next door, the other way through the Forest of Dean. So, we are connected to England. There's no doubt about it. We are a border county.
How do you find your own identity as a young Welsh boy and man? Is it a period of time where your parents are deeply entrenched in the region and speak about the things that you speak about now, or how does that come about for you, this idea of Welsh identity? No,
I'd say my parents were English. They came to Wales. My father was from Scunthorpe, from a steel working family. My mother came from London. And after the Second World War, they met in Bomber Command in High Wycombe during the Second World War. And my father was a scientist, and so he worked on radar in the war, but then went back to Birmingham University and was a chemist. And he came down in what really was the last great wave of investment in Wales. That, for example, in Merthyr Tydfil, the great iron town of Merthyr Tydfil, Hoover started to build washing machines. And in Ystrad Gunlais, further west, they had the Tic-Toc factory, which is the watch factory made by Smiths, watches made by Smiths. So they were looking beyond the age of iron and coal and steel to what we could do next. And in Pontypool, they built the nylon factory. And my father came to work in this brand new production centre for nylon. And so it was a period of great optimism. And they came there, having had very much a British identity during the war effort. They felt part of that. They felt that, only together as one Britain could they defeat Nazism. So they believed in it. So, if you'd have asked them about Welsh independence, they'd have said definitely not. But in the period of my life, that has changed, because there has been no further great investment in Wales. Wales has been abandoned basically by the overlord, by the landlord, England. Government in Westminster has become a more brutal, harder place. And so to fight a Welsh corner has, it started off as a small scrap, But it is growing. It is, and it's the theme of independence, of devolved powers, at least, is on the increase.
It definitely seems that, and this is pure straw poll, from chatting to people over the last couple of days, it is a conversation. It's also a conversation that people like to conclude with by saying something like, it's not going to happen, or there is no financial incentive for us to ever separate from the United Kingdom. Is that the real experience, or have I just ended up stumbling upon people who are all of the same view?
No, there's a terrible lack of self-confidence in Wales. There's no question that we, in general, we simply do not feel we are strong enough or even brave enough to take on the responsibilities of governing ourselves. And there's a saying that the Welsh make great foot soldiers, but they don't produce officer. There's no officer class in Wales because the decisions are left to others. And we have to disprove that. There is a truth that young people leave Wales to go and find jobs elsewhere. And so we have to get those people, those people who can take on big jobs and big responsibilities, we have to get them to come back to Wales, which is going to be a challenge. It's if you neglect a land for so long, then the incentives to come home are limited. So we are starting from a low base point. But that is part of the problem, that you have to ask the question, why is Wales in such a poor state? And it is because the Westminster government has abandoned it. And we have to do something about it. The Westminster government give Wales the money to look after itself, they say, to run the devolved government, the devolution, the Senedd in Cardiff. But that money on its own left Wales in a state where it automatically qualified for emergency European funding. And now that funding has gone because we have left the European Union. We are left with this block granted according to the Barnett formula, and we're stuck with it, and it is never going to be enough. So we are always going to be impoverished unless we do something about it ourselves.
It's very interesting what you say there. There's a load there. But what I'm interested in is, I guess, the sporting context of what you talk about. There is no officer class in Wales, whereas quite often what we see on the rugby pitch, for example, is, officer class in 15 shirts almost, and it is the idea of heart and soul and the passion of this country going into the rugby jersey. So why is that at odds with the stereotype of, or the description, I should say, of Wales that you've just given there?
Well, it's a problem because come the Six Nations, for example, we all turn into rabid, passionate Welsh people standing up for Welshness. And then we play England and it reaches its spike, especially on that one day. And the things you'll hear in the changing room, you would think, oh my God, here is a country, a small country, truly at war with the big neighbour. But come Monday, when it's all done, the conversation dies. So it always struck me that there was so much passion on the day, but on the Monday, where had it all gone? So I think it is, in geopolitical terms, a phony way of looking at Wales. That it is a stereotype that come rugby days we all get hugely inflamed, but it leads nowhere. So we have to be able to tap into that passion and make it last a lot longer, and be turned to the real issues. I mean, it is only a sporting occasion, but there's a real life to lead as well, and we have to make sure that Welsh passion is focused on the real problems.
That's the great Eddie Butler in conversation with Eoin over in Wales. Obviously, at the minute, there'll be more of that to come across our social channels over the course of today, and do stay tuned to that. Plenty of interesting topics, and gets well away from the rugby, as you've been hearing there. Right, it is coming up on 5 to 9. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. Chicago's Northwestern Wildcats, as you've been aware if you've been watching OTB over the last few months, are going to take on the Nebraska Cornhuskers in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. It's the Aviva Stadium. It's Saturday, 27th of August. Hospitality package is available now. You just head along to collegefootballireland.com January tickets go on sale in March, and as part of that, I am delighted to say that the Northwestern head football coach Pat Fitzgerald joins us in studio. Morning to you. Coach, I think, is the official.
Oh,
is that the way? It's unusual for an Irish person to go with that moniker, but I think that's the exception.
Yeah, I guess technically I've been called a lot worse, so I'll take whatever I get called. But it's great to be on with you this morning.
I know, having spoken to the guys, Brendan, the guys who were organising behind the scenes, about when the name Pat Fitzgerald came on the scene before we had any sort of recognition of what you were about, and you're a very big deal in terms of American football in the US. But the name Pat Fitzgerald, everybody was like, well, this guy, he's one of our own.
Yeah, right. It was great. We had a wonderful day yesterday. My wife Stacey and I were able to go to Epic and really find amazing stories and amazing background on my family's heritage. And I can't thank the folks enough for the work they put in. That started the day, and the day ended with going out to see my cousin and his family in Nurney. So it was an emotional day. It was a historic day for me to learn a lot about my Irish roots and heritage, and then to be able to put the human touch to it and sit in the kitchen and meet with family was really surreal.
That is class. So your Kildare is the connection. Is it both your grandparents, or what could you figure out?
Yeah, both my grandparents were born here in Ireland, and they basically at Epic went through the information they had from the United States and started to track it back.
Okay.
And what we learned yesterday was 1901 census was really the last census in Ireland that there is really concrete information on where people were born, where they lived, and the Fitzgerald side's obviously from the west, and found out kind of exactly where they believed that my grandfather was born and where he lived. Found out they're farmers, and there was some information, not as much. And then the Mearns family down in Nurney, there was quite a bit of information. That's my grandmother, and sadly, my grandfather Fitzgerald, I did not know, passed away before I was born, but my grandmother I knew very, very well, and very close with her, and she's obviously since passed, but to see all the information, it was, again, you fly in, you land at 5:30 local, and this is one of the first things you do. It was really incredible.
So they're first cousins?
First cousins to my dad, so it would be my second cousins. Yeah. Yep, and just great conversation. It was, and then for me to get to know them a little bit was fabulous yesterday. But they're able to watch our team, on social media, online, and then sometimes, as they told me yesterday, they call it the telly. In the States we call it the television. So it was great. It was just a fabulous day.
And so were you knocking on the door going, "Hey, I'm your cousin"?
Yeah, Sil reached out to me so my cousin on social media a couple of years back and said, "Hey, I'm your cousin in Ireland." Really?
You're like, yeah.
No. I reached out to some of them.
Here's another one.
Yeah, right. And we were able to connect the dots. Wow. And we've communicated back and forth through that, and then through everybody with the game, we're able to get me connected. And Jimmy, our driver, drove Stacey, my wife, and I out there. It was amazing.
Let's give people a bit of a sense of who you are. I've been mentioning all morning, this guy's kind of a big deal, and that's very much the case. You're a college football Hall of Famer. You'd spent a brief spell with the Dallas Cowboys. You've been at the same role with the Wildcats for over 15 years now. Give us a bit of a sense of what that role is.
Yeah, well, as the head football coach, I'm in the leadership role that oversees, our football program. And when you think about American college football, it's second most watched and second most popular sport in the United States behind the National Football League, the NFL. So we've passed up the NBA basketball. We've passed up Major League Baseball as an entity as far as college football and college athletics. So until most recently, an amateur sport completely. The coaches, we get salaried in contracts, but the athletes are in college. They're in school. Aptly named student athletes. So to see, where things have been able to go with our sport, with our game, and the way that it's grown. I played in the mid-'90s at Northwestern, so we're just outside of Chicago, about 12 miles north of the downtown, I guess you call it city center here. And right on the shores of Lake Michigan. And it's just a beautiful setting, a small school, private school of about 8,000 undergraduate students. And so it's just a fabulous place.
Yeah, those numbers in an Irish context, by the way, are not small, but I do take the point in the US context. What is your remit then within that? Is it recruitment? I don't even know. Is that quite the right word? But it's everything essentially? Is it?
Well, yeah. A best way maybe would be the CEO of the organization, right? I obviously answer to people within the university, but I oversee all of our operations when it comes to recruiting, player development, training. The coaching aspects of that, the tactics which we employ on the field, I guess the pitch here. I'm starting to learn the lingo. Yeah, I'm getting it down. And then obviously from a standpoint of our alums. And those that are generous and donate, financially and emotionally to our program, being a steward and a conduit to our program. So it's all encompassing. It's a lot. It's not just what happens on the pitch. Those are only 12 days of the year. The other 350 plus days, there's a lot that goes into it, it's never a dull moment.
There are often comparisons made between the amateur aspect of the GAA here, for example, which I'm sure you've been discussing over the last couple of days, and college football in the US. But the dynamic is very different in a lot of ways. I mean, it's about to get maybe very, very different in terms of the salaried nature potentially of athletes. But we'll come to that in a second. But the scholarship aspect, and is it 80 plus scholarships get dished out? How do you manage that transient nature of students and keeping ahead of the fact that, like, how many students do you lose every year, for example?
So you have 85 scholarship athletes, and then we'll have 27 that come onto the team over 5. So basically you have 5 classes from freshmen to basically seniors at the university, and I get a total of 127 for each year, meaning not 127 times 5. This season coming up, I have 112 total players. Okay. So that's who's in the arena playing, participating. You're exactly right. A major part of it is the recruiting, is the development and retention. But no matter what, you're going to have X amount of seniors move on to the National Football League, and an overwhelming majority across our sport, across every team, don't get that opportunity. They move on to life.
Real life,
move on to life. So, you're pretty much 25% of your roster turns over every year. So it's that recruiting aspect.
How hard is it? I mean, are you sitting down saying I need X? Is it the same number of players in each position that you recruit back into every year, or does it depend on quality, or how do you manage that?
Exactly, both. I mean, you have numbers with the 85 scholarships that you want to have, by position and where you want those numbers set. So you look at what you're graduating and departing your program. You've anticipated that, so you don't go from maybe losing 3 of one position. Now I need to go get 3 to be great players. You hope they are, but you hope you have older players that are ready to step into that role, and then just kind of that cycle just continues as you move forward. The recruiting aspect is a big part of it, especially with certain positions. For us, everybody probably knows the names like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. The quarterback position in our game is so important. And you usually only have 5 of those, and one's really important. That's the guy who makes everything go. So it's a very unique sport. If you've had a chance to see it or watch it, it's very integral. But before we come over in August, I hope everybody here in Ireland, just goes online and looks up Football for Dummies, American football, and it'll be able to explain to you everything that's going on.
I'm a signed up member of that particular channel. What the pay for play conversation has definitely resonated over here. What's your stance on that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing a little bit with college athletics now in the States. We're not directly paying as a university to the athletes, but similar to the Olympic model in the States, where our name, image, and likeness, our athletes were not able to make any revenue on that, and now rules have changed that they're able to do that. So that's going to really change the dynamic. It was just the scholarship. in the past. Now they can get on top of the scholarship. Really like any job, like any marketing deal, a partnership with a company for their name, image, and likeness. So as we look at all these jerseys, and our biggest benefactor, Pat Ryan, started Aon, and as we all know in European soccer, Aon, I think it's Man U that you'd see all over their jerseys. So that's a big part of where things are going in the States. I have heard about what's going on here with the GAA, and if it goes to pay for play, it'll be a very different model. Yeah, it'll be a professional model.
One of the big differences is that you're dealing with kids.
Yeah. Well, 18 to 22 is our age group that I get.
As in, you're automatically creating, in some cases, many cases, maybe millionaires, but certainly very wealthy young people in society. How much in your role, I presume that is occupying a big part of your headspace in terms of how you would potentially manage that situation in terms of, I don't know what it would have been like for me at 18 if somebody had been saying, listen, you're now suddenly getting $500,000 a year into your account. So trying to pre-manage that, I presume, is a big part of your...
Well, education, fiscal responsibility and how to properly set a budget, and, how to go about running your day and then looking at a year and then thinking about how to invest that money. I mean, we would do a lot of education to make sure our guys are prepared, and then you hope that they're able to listen and follow that direction.
Was it Bubba Cunningham from Carolina? I'd say this week he had said it's moving from university student dynamic to employer employee. Yeah. That is a big old shift.
Well, it will become much more similar to our professional football, like the NFL. I mean, it will be. It will be a very different dynamic. And there'll be some positives, there'll be negatives. There always is when you have this type of systemic change. We're kind of in the middle right now. We were amateur, and the NFL is on the other side. We're somewhere in the middle. There'll be definite change. We just don't know what exactly that's going to look like. But in our sport, we're regulated by a governing body. Here we have the GAA in Ireland. We have the NCAA in the United States. And, that's been under fire. It's been under fire through lawsuits. It's been under fire from federal government in the United States. And so where that exactly goes, it's got two main forces really impacting it with the legal system in the United States and the federal government. So we'll see here over the next
possibly under new management at some point. Do you foresee that? Or...
Potentially, I've got enough problems, so I'll worry about my issues. That's fair. But when you look at the big picture, it's definitely changing.
Last one, does it change the dynamic between the fans and the team? You mentioned the alumni earlier on. Does that connection just remain, or is there like more of a cynicism of, this is suddenly not quite?
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of the discussion. I think by the media in the United States, most college teams are supported by their alums, and then regionally where the university is located. Again, in the United States, college football, a lot of our schools at our level are big state. We were talking about the rugby match tomorrow. Two countries, Wales and Ireland. Well, the University of Illinois is our biggest rival. We're in Illinois, the state. They're in central Illinois. We're in suburban Chicago. And so we're rivals, but at the end of the day, their fan base is more loyal to the central part of the state. Ours is more, around. And then because of the nature of our university, we have a worldwide draw of our student body. Where at Ohio State University, largest university in our conference, 65,000 students that attend, right? Their stadium's over 100,000. So, I mean, if you were to think about it this way, we have 8,000 students, they have 65,000.
Well, it's the context of your point about the 8,000 earlier.
Correct. So when you really look at it, it's pretty unique.
Tell us then a little bit about it. I mentioned about the uneducated aspects, certainly on my end, to college football and to, I think, a lot of people here. What is this a home game now for you guys in August? What comes with a home game?
Yeah, well, there's nothing better than the pageantry of college football in the United States. From the minute you wake up, on game day, you'll hear a lot about tailgating, and it's basically, what is it? It's a party, and around the parking lots, around the stadiums, people actually pay to pretty much lease that spot and then throw a party around their trunk of their car. And so it's music, it's drink, it's food, it's family, it's friends. And it's all the pageantry that goes along with that before the game, hours before the game. The parking lots in Evanston, outside of Ryan Field where we play, it's restricted, but it's 4 hours before kickoff, the party starts. Okay, and it starts there in the parking lots. And then, probably similar to around the pubs, you would maybe go from the pubs to Aviva Stadium and go from partying in the pub to then partying in the stadium, and bands and parades. The team will show up, and you'll have, depending on the time of the year and where you're playing, potentially fly over military planes. I mean, it goes from the kickoff all the way to the end. That there's just it's just a lively, passionate event, and especially when you're the road team, you're typically in a very hostile environment.
Yeah, there's something a lot about what you're saying that really speaks to an Irish audience as well, I think, in terms of that party aspect of it. So how much of what you're doing now this week is recce, or is this mostly promotional, or is there some of this that you've got the little notebook out and you're like, okay, here's some stuff we can come back to?
Yeah, well, a lot of it will be promotional, but then also we're going to go over to the stadium, and I'll get a feel for the logistics. A group of my team was already over last month. To see the stadium, how the locker room's set up. So, all those little tiny, minute details all go into the operation of game day for us. So, getting a great feel, I'll go to the hotel and look and see the meeting rooms and how we'll go about it. I mean, we're gonna take 175 to 200 people in my organization, take them from Chicago and bring them here and try to execute that same energy, same passion, same game day, when we come over and have the game, and then bring a bunch of fans. Nebraska will bring a bunch of fans. If you think about it in context, the University of Nebraska, no pro teams in the state of Nebraska.
Right.
So it is the premier university of the state. Their stadium on game day, when it's full, is the third largest city in the state of Nebraska. Wow. Just inside the stadium. So their fans are passionate. I'm a big fan of purple and white. That's our school colors. We'll have a lot of purple and white. We'll have a lot from Chicago and throughout the United States. But I think the Irish fans in the country will get a firm grasp of Nebraska. And I've got great respect for them and for their fans. Their fans are as loyal as anybody you'll see. So it'll be a great challenge for us, even though it's our home game. Their fans will travel well.
What I should have asked you earlier on in terms of your remit. Head coach is the title here in terms of the game you'll go into tomorrow. Head coach is very hands-on, coaching the team thing. Is it same with yourself?
Especially during you call it training, we call it practice. Very hands-on. And then I have on my staff one person that oversees our offense and one that oversees our defense. Yeah. And then the kicking game aspect, I have another person that oversees that. So then I manage those three. So all of our decisions are made collectively together.
A few things I wanted to ask you about before we let you away. You have a couple of former players involved in Super Bowl.
I do.
That's exciting.
Last year I started the season with 21 players in the National Football League. Wow. And now to have two former players that played for the LA Rams that are a part of it. I went pretty much... I think 10 or 12 years in a row of having one of my guys play in the Super Bowl. So it's a spectacular experience for them. And then for the Rams, they're playing in SoFi, which is their home stadium. So it should be an interesting game. I saw that you'd signed a 10-year extension, I think, to your contract Northwestern not that long ago. But there have also been other links to a couple of NFL teams. Have you been tempted by that route, as you might say? Yeah, I'm very happy, very thankful for where I'm at. As a former player and student at Northwestern, and being in Chicago, and my wife and I are at home, and they've been incredibly supportive. If you ever come to Evanston and see our campus, it's absolutely beautiful, picturesque on the shores of Lake Michigan. And most recently, university committed a major facility upgrade, and so the Ryan Fieldhouse, which is our indoor training facility in Wilson Field, along with the Walter Athletic Center, is state-of-the-art, $270 million that we spent to build this state-of-the-art training center right in the heart of our campus. It's not just for our football team. We also share the facility with our other teams, other athletes, male and female, and we're in the beginning stages of then redoing our stadium, Ryan Field, which will be done in the next handful of years. So a lot of exciting times. You're not going anywhere anytime soon, is what I'm saying. I would prefer to be there for as long as they'll allow me to be. Yeah, that is big bucks, big business, and we're really looking forward to the game as well. College Football Ireland
Ireland.com is the place to go. General tickets on sale for March. Hospitality packages available right now. I know you've got a packed schedule. Thanks a million for coming in. Really good, interesting to hear about your Kildare links and how all that has come about, and we're really looking forward to the game in August as well. Coach, thanks a million for coming in.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Coach Pat Fitzgerald of Northwestern there. As I said, collegefootballireland.com is the place you need to get along for tickets to that general sale from March. And by the way, I should mention as well that we're going to be giving away some really nice co-branded beanies and baseball caps. We might be able to take a look at those on screen. There you go. Nice couple of items for you there. Ahead of the game, the Wildcats against Nebraska, Aer Lingus College Football Classic at Viva Stadium, 27th of August. I mentioned the website there, and we are going to be, if you keep an eye on our social channels over the course of the day, do keep an eye there. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We're going to find out how you can get your hands on a couple of those nice little items. We're going to be back talking Six Nations rugby with Alan Quinlan after these.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Football Pod on OTB Sports. James O'Donoghue, you're very welcome along.
Thank you very much. The king is dead. Long live the king.
This fella's going to be a handful for the year. I can feel it already.
Get the hop on everyone else and hear the Football Pod first on the OTB Sports app every Tuesday.
When we beat Tyrone at 15, I thought we were on a winner.
For the latest on GAA, rugby, football and much more, download the OTB Sports app, turn on push notifications and hear it here first.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
This podcast, I tune in pretty much every week. It's just great exposure for everyone.
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
The FA said that they were going to significantly increase the prize money.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
We do go back a long way. He's been brilliant. He was deeply suspicious of me when we first started working together. Because I was working for the Observer and the BBC back in the day when he was the barrackroom lawyer with the Great English side of the early 90s. And of course, the rapport between the media and current players is always a bit strained and a bit tense. And it was in our day. But we sort of muddled along at first, and I think it was probably a seminal moment when we were quite young, me as a commentator and he as a second voice, and we were walking back towards the city centre of Rome after an Italy-France game, and we said, well, let's have a quick beer, and we walked into this bar, and it was a big bar populated entirely by people from the Basque region, and Brian walked in and the whole place stopped. And they advanced towards him, instantly recognising who he was. And these were the days when England used to go and there was war in Paris, and Lascaux and Moscato had been sent off with Brian snarling in their face. Stephen Hilditch, I think, was the referee who sent them off, so there was an Irish involvement as well. So it was pretty tense. But the great thing was that the Basques advanced towards Brian, let's say 30 of them. Brian advanced towards the Basques. And as they got chin to chin, they suddenly went, oh my God, but you are so small. Yeah. And he said, small? And the next thing he's organising a scrummage session in the bar. So he says, all right, you Basques, you organise a scrummage your side. And he rounded up a load of Italian waiters to come and be his pack around him, and I said, well, what shall I do? He said, you can be scrum half. So I'm rolling up beer mats into a ball, and he says to the Basques, right, it's your put-in. You just have to strike for the ball, and you'll have made your point that I'm no good. So he did one of those little things that front row forwards do. And the little Basque hooker, who was a player, he was a proper player, he said, I cannot move. And he just could not move his right foot to strike for the ball. Wow. And so they got up and they, And then he said, right, it's how my put in. So he said, like, re-pad the ball and go down. And he says to the bass, he says, right, you can do whatever you like to me. And they do, so he's there and his nose is on the floor and he's bent and buckled, and the Italian team around him, the Italian waiters, aren't giving him much support. But this little tap comes, so I put the rolled up pile of beer mats in, and from nowhere, from under his nose, he effortlessly sweeps the ball back out of the scrum, and he left to a standing ovation. So that's my Brian.
That's my Brian, and that is the great Eddie Butler in conversation with Eoin. There's loads of that good stuff. It'll be all up in podcast a little bit later on today, and you can check it out on our YouTube channel as well, about Brian Moore, of course, who he would have worked with around the Six Nations on commentary for years, and it's been announced obviously this week that Brian Moore is going to be leaving the BBC in the large part, not entirely, ITV picking up some coverage, and thirst for more regional voices, apparently, according to one of the newspapers this morning. Certainly somebody to be missed, Brian Moore on commentary, and as I said, you can check out all of Eoin's brilliant work from Wales during the week. You can go along to our YouTube channel and see all of that there. Pretty exciting, and a reminder of our competition this morning. Final pair of tickets to give away on the show to Ireland against Wales at the Aviva tomorrow afternoon. It's all with thanks to Aldi, who are official fresh food partner to Irish Rugby. This week launched Play With Your Food with the RFU. New research by Aldi showing that over 40% of Irish kids don't eat fruit and veg every day. Play With Your Food encourages kids to think differently about how it is that they consume their fruit and veg. To enter our competition, to be in with a chance of winning that pair of tickets to Ireland against Wales, you just have to do the following. You have to head along to OTB on TikTok. You can see it there, and you can see the handle in front of you if you're watching us, and if you're listening, off_the_ball is our handle. Like one of our videos, comment with our secret word that I'm going to tell you now, and we'll know at that point that you are entering our competition. That secret word is Raj, the man that you could see on your screen there a second ago, ROG. Simple as that. And we're going to pick a winner at random later today and get those tickets over to you. Just make sure that you are following us on TikTok, because otherwise we won't be able to PM you with the details of your win, and we'll have to move on to the next person on the list. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, Adrian. How are you?
Flying it. Really looking forward, I have to say, to the build up to this seems to be going on for ages, and at last it's upon us. I was reading a thing yesterday, and it was funny because it really resonated from thinking about stuff that Eddie O'Sullivan used to talk about in relation to momentum, as far back as that, and it was in Rugby World magazine about the whole notion of momentum. Long begone the days, Quinny, of them throwing us Italy in the first round, and we're able to get the engine nicely oiled and up and running. We're straight in here.
Yeah, straight in. I think obviously, Adrian, it's better if you have a home game starting the Six Nations. And look, historically, and I remember when I played in it myself, the prep time wasn't always ideal. People were saying, why were Ireland away in a camp this week in Portugal? Is there a need for that? Yes, there is, because I think you get so much work done when you're away in a group like that together. It's not just the on-field training, but it's the videos and the little conversations players have together and all that prep you can do. So it wasn't too long ago that, you know, the French players were playing in between the Six Nations and stuff like that. So sometimes teams are rusty when they start out, and that can be an issue. And the word momentum that Eddie is using, I heard that many times from him, and it's very apt for the Six Nations, because I think if you look at Wales 2 years ago when they won the Grand Slam, you know, they probably could have lost that game in France, in Paris. France capitulated in the second half, and suddenly you're coming out of Paris in round one with a win, and you start to believe that you can get more results. Last year, you know, Peter O'Mahony was sent off when Ireland played him over in Cardiff in that first game. Ireland looked like they probably, you know, if they had the 15 players, and even at the end, they could have still won the game. They go up to Murrayfield for the next game, and I think they just claw out a win again, and suddenly they're going for a championship, and they won the championship. So that's why I'm kind of low to write Wales off as well in this competition, because every year when you write Wales off, I think they seem to surprise a few people, and they're the ones who really believe and get that momentum. And that the Six Nations is like that. It is about just getting a good start, and Ireland are in a really good position tomorrow with a home crowd as well, a full house. So we can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but there's reason to be optimistic for this tournament.
Yeah, reminder that you're watching OTB AM. We are live with Gillette at 22 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. I was interested listening to Rob Harris earlier on. He was talking to Eoin over in Wales, Quinny, about Wayne Pivac and the development of that, because actually it just struck me that it isn't that long ago that both Wayne Pivac and Andy Farrell, people were talking about, you know, are these guys going to last to the World Cup? And suddenly both of them have had certainly upturns in fortune, and it's starting to look like you certainly couldn't say a settled team, in the sense that he's obviously, maybe some of his hand has been forced this weekend, Andy Farrell, in some of the selections he's had. But in terms of our style, Farrell ball, I saw it described in the Telegraph this morning. In terms of the style, we're getting to that settled position that should take us into the World Cup now.
Yeah, the game has changed. They've changed the way they're playing. I think every team needs to be good at the kicking game and be pragmatic at times and be direct. I think that's a given for every side. You can't, have an attacking team who never kick the ball. I think Ireland, obviously under Joe Schmidt, were incredibly successful and so effective in everything they've done. That open off the cuff rugby was a challenge for the players if they got. And I think 2 years ago the template was set by England, wasn't it? In that first game in Dublin, where England came and smothered Ireland, physically outmatched them, slowed them down, frustrated them, got in their face, and they kind of set a template for other teams to follow suit. And Ireland didn't really have a plan B, if you like, and they just didn't look comfortable in playing off the cuff rugby. And I think you need that a little bit. I think with this team, they're probably a difficult team to analyse. They still can be quite direct. Lots of good ball carriers now. I think, Porter, Kelleher, Furlong offer a real incredible dimension to ball carrying ability. I think the three of them are world class at that. And so I think the style has changed, obviously. And from a public's perspective, I think they would love to see, more of the same in November. But it's not always easy. And that's where the Six Nations can be a little bit different. And I think people are getting very optimistic and excited about tomorrow against Wales, but it doesn't always go to plan. The Six Nations, it's like playing in the FA Cup, if you like, in England. Sometimes teams can frustrate you. The Welsh players, when they put on that Welsh jersey, just find a passion and a desire from somewhere that makes them different players from when they play with their regions. So are Ireland going to be allowed play with this kind of free-flowing accuracy that they showed in November? Well, they've got to create it themselves, but I just have a feeling Wales are going to try and make it really difficult for them. But the style has changed, and I think it's changed for the better. And you cut your cloth according to your measure, and I think they've done that. They've seen that they needed to make some adaptation, and Mike Catt deserves credit for this. He doesn't get probably. You mentioned about Wayne Pivac being under pressure and Andy Farrell, but I think Mike Catt was under a lot of pressure as well. And we've seen a little change from the end of the Six Nations last year through the summer and particularly in November, which is very pleasing to see.
And so that's the style. On the selections then, I was reading Mac Hansen particularly, to begin with, maybe Quinny, I was reading in the I think it might have been the Mail this morning, where they were talking about making the comparisons between Michael Bent, Matt Mostyn, Brian Smith back in the day, like projects that came in, were thrown in at the last minute when maybe there were other options. It didn't quite work. Like, look, at who knows, it's his first cap. I was mentioned earlier on that I saw him up close and personal at the Aviva a couple of months ago, and he looks more like a James Lowe than a Matt Mostyn or a Michael Bent type. He looks like this guy could be a real player.
He's a really intelligent footballer, and he's quick. I think he played fly half when he was underage, full back. So he has that variety to his game and incredibly quick. From the very minute I saw Mac Hansen, I liked him as a player. I just think he presents himself. He loves to come in fields, give options, and he's a real footballer. Obviously, it's a step up to international level, and you know, you saw what happened James Lowe at the start of last year when he got picked, and you make one or two defensive errors, and it was never about James Lowe not being physical enough to make the tackles or shying away from him. It's just getting the timing right.
And on that, Quinny, specifically, like, that's the big question for Mac Hansen. Like, it's not as if he's just starting in some November international. It's his first cap against, like, one of our big rivals, first game of the Six Nations.
Yeah, and there's different sorts of pressure. I think, you know, Rhys Zammit and Johnny McNichol are really quick wingers. I think Zammit is someone you could have a full conversation about him, how Ireland are going to cope with him tomorrow. His pace is phenomenal. But I just think it's making decisions on his wing, not coming up and in, you know, knowing when to show him the outside, all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's down to good decision making. I don't think he's a bad defender. I think one or two little errors for Connacht. Andy Friend was on during the week defending him and saying he's not a bad defender, because I think that's just the key. You've got to do your bread and butter stuff first. He's good in the air and a really intelligent player, and he's unbelievably quick. So I genuinely think that he's going to do really well for Ireland, and he has that ability to step up and play international level. And I'm sure Simon Easterby's defence coach would have, you know, spoken to him, and he would have bedded into the systems defensively and from an attacking point of view. Andy Farley said that he was really, really impressed with how quickly he's adapted to everything. First in November when he was in the squad, and he's trained unbelievably well, I believe. So I think it's a big call, it's a brave call, but I think it's the right one, and it's a great opportunity for him.
How do we stop Louis Rhys-Zammit?
You just don't try not to give him space. I think he's, you know, you saw his try last week for Gloucester. If anyone hadn't seen it, the ball was kicked downfield, and he just sides through a defence and scores in the opposite corner, and looks like he's in third gear, but he just he's very, very dangerous. I think most swingers, if you give him space, they'll exploit it. I think he just has that extra little zip. It might only be a tiny little bit to his opposition, but it can make a difference. You just don't kick loosely to him, and you make sure that you defend. You have a support defender with you if he tries to step or take you on the outside. So, look, I don't think it's a major concern, but I just think if you kick loosely to him, you've just got to make sure that your kick chase is really connected. Yeah. And he doesn't get an opportunity to pick out front rowers or loose forwards, or, you know, that someone who's not as quick as traditionally as your backs. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think they'll be very well aware of that. And look, he may score, and he may have a great championship. I think he will. He's a brilliant player, but you just got to be wary of these guys, and that's what all not just Rhys-Zammit. They'll have their analysis done on every individual tomorrow for Wales.
A few things to finish on, Quinny. First of all, Ross Harris was talking about 12 points Ireland to win by, which makes me nervous. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it makes me a little bit nervous as well, because, you know, I've always been intrigued when you play, you know, the Scarlets or Cardiff or the Ospreys, and, you know, having played against them with Munster, you feel you have a dominant win, and the Irish provinces have been very successful against the Welsh regions. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. And sometimes I question, you know, these guys, some of these players then go and play for Wales, and it's just their collective spirit and passion when they put on that Welsh jersey. And I don't mean they're bad players for the regions, because obviously, you know, it's down to their squad depth and finances and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think if you go right back to the Ospreys, when they had all, you know, huge investment there, they were an incredibly strong side. Scarlets at times have been, you know, hitting great heights and have wonderful players. But when some of these guys, when they come together and they play for Wales, they're just a different beast, and they obviously have incredible passion. So it always makes me scared when we start talking about big scores and big wins. I think on paper, if you ask someone for an honest prediction, and I think the Welsh people would probably say the same, Ireland are in a much better position. You know, when you've missing Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, Falatau, Tipperick, North, Halfpenny, Navidi, Lydiot, like that is some amount of experience and quality to be missing. They still have a very good side, Wales, but I just think they're missing a bit of power and aggression and experience. So it does make me nervous, but on paper you think, yes, Ireland will win by 10, 15 points. But we got a bit of a lesson 2 years ago, didn't we? We had a brilliant 2018, and England started that kind of difficult run for Ireland, and 2019 was a bit of a write-off overall. So there's reasons to be optimistic, given what we saw in November. Not just the win against the All Blacks. I just think the ruthlessness against Japan and Argentina impressed me a lot as well. So if they can continue on like that, there's no guarantee. And I think they will have moments, not just in the match tomorrow, but throughout the tournament, where teams will try and smash them and upset them and unsettle them. And that's really going to be the intrigue for me, is how they deal with that pressure.
Yeah, and like we could go ahead and do a Grand Slam, Quinny, and we still have people giving out it's the wrong time, not World Cup year. So we'll see. Hopefully the start of a good few weeks for us. I wanted to leave by asking you about the passing that was announced yesterday, Tom Kiernan. Quinny, obviously Munster legend, and what he offered to Irish rugby over the years. Like, reading even some of the numbers yesterday in terms of Ireland caps at that time that he played for, obviously 50 odd caps, and a captain for half of those, 5 Lions tests. He was the coach, which a lot of people won't be aware of the All Blacks for that day, the Red 78 podcast, of course, in 78, and coached Ireland to a Triple Crown in 82 as well. This guy's service to Irish rugby cannot be overstated.
It's incredible, Adrian, and when you go back and look what Tom achieved as a player, as a coach, as an administrator in the game, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. You know, we often talk in modern times about, you know, Brian O'Driscoll and Paul O'Connell and Ronan O'Gara, what they achieved in my era and my time, and rightly so. But you forget what some of these people and someone like Tom achieved, to get 54 caps in a time that there wasn't that many internationals. You know, you didn't have your summer tests and your Novembers. There certainly wasn't as many internationals. To get 54 caps and to achieve, you know, and captain the team and captain Munster and coach Munster. So the list is endless. And I think, you know, what Tom gave to the game was just incredible. I know a lot of his family, his sons, and it is very sad. You know, I spoke about losing my own dad a few years ago, and they'll feel the same. Tom was 83, but you know, he'll leave a big void, to his family, obviously, but to the rugby community as well, and particularly to his club, because I think the club is where you start, and where you're. It all starts for you as a player, and you get involved, and you move up the ranks. And Tom was very proud of his club as well, and proud of Ireland and Munster as well. But I think for Cork Con and the people of Cork Constitution, you know, everybody can be very proud of particularly his family, of what he achieved in the game. And it is sad, and our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, because, you know, like I said, you feel that pain, and they'll feel it. And, you know, for what the man achieved in the game was just incredible, as I said. Yeah,
and Tony Ward writes brilliantly this morning as well about what an inspirational character he was, and I know there'll be plenty of tributes paid to Tom Kiernan over the coming days and weeks as well. I've no doubt about that. Alan, thanks a million for that, and enjoy the rugby over the weekend.
Cheers. Thanks, Adrian.
Alan Quinlan there of the Red 78 podcast, which you can check out wherever it is you pick up your podcasts. It's Munster focused. Himself and Niamh Briggs picking through all events of the day. So just a last chance to remind you about our competition this morning. Head over to the OTB TikTok page. You can get full details on it. There are tickets for Ireland against Wales at the Aviva tomorrow, and it'll be running until 1 today, so get in before 1 o'clock. _the_ball, that's our handle on TikTok. Enter there, just like a video, comment with our secret word, which is that man you saw on your screen a second ago, Rog, R-O-G, and we'll know that you've entered. Once you've done that, we're going to announce the winner at 1, all with thanks to Aldi, who've launched their Play With Your Food campaign. So that is almost it from us for this morning. You've been watching OTB AM. If you've missed anything live, you can listen back across the OTB podcast network. You can pick us up as well, OTB on YouTube, of course. It's where you'll find all of Owen's brilliant work from Wales during the week. Lots of it up there, all the build up to Ireland, Wales and the Six Nations, including Brian O'Driscoll from last night's show on OTB AM, brought to you live every morning by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. You can put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. OTB live again tonight from 7 and 1 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday with some brilliant shows lined up. OTB AM, of course, back on Monday morning. We'll have all the reaction from the rugby and beyond over the weekend. We'll see you then. We're going to right now leave you with some John Giles. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the show. Just to remind you, there is live football on tonight as well. The second semi-final of the Africa Cup of Nations still scoreless with 32 minutes played between Cameroon and Egypt in the Olembe Stadium in Yaoundé. But I'm delighted to say joining us on the line as ever is the one and only John Giles. John, very good evening to you.
Evening, Richie.
How are you getting on?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Always a plus. I mean, yeah, yes. Always a plus. It's been another busy week. Obviously, we had transfer deadline day and all that kind of stuff. But I guess the story that's kind of plumped up out of nowhere really in the last couple of days, and it seems to gather momentum and kind of as we speak is even gathering further momentum. Roy Keane is in the frame certainly for the vacancy at Sunderland. They sacked Lee Johnson at the weekend. They lost 6-0 to Bolton Wanderers in League One, but they're still third in the table there. Wigan above them do have games in hand, but it hasn't been a disaster by any means under Johnson so far this season. But the first number on their speed dial appears to be the former Republic of Ireland captain. Some people will be surprised because he's been such a prevalent figure in the media for the last few years. Are you surprised to see him in the conversation for a manager's job?
No, I'm not, Richie. I remember reading the paper there maybe a couple of weeks back where he was questioning some of the people who were being offered managerial positions, and he wasn't. So he might want to get back into it. Well, if he's going to be interviewed for the job, he obviously does. So I'm not that surprised. I was surprised when I read that he was interested in getting back into management again, to be quite honest.
Why so?
Well, he's doing very, very well on the television. And managerial positions are very, very, very difficult jobs, difficult situations, especially nowadays for clubs like Sunderland, who are a big club and a huge support, don't have the financial backing that's needed today. And I don't think Sunderland have that financial backing in relation to Chelsea and Manchester United and Manchester City to do what's needed to be done, Richie. I think it's more difficult job now, a far more difficult job now than when he was at Sunderland the last time out.
Yeah, they were a yo-yo club around then. I mean, he took them over when they were in the championship. They won the championship by a couple of points from Birmingham. They went up. He spent a lot of money. The likes of Craig Gordon, Kevin Jones, Andy Reid. There were more came in that summer. Michael Chopper came in for $5 million from Newcastle. So there was money spent by Keane in his last Premier League season with Sunderland. But that Premier League season was a struggle. He was gone by the following December and then pitched up at Ipswich. And it's like, I know obviously he's been assistant to Martin O'Neill at both Ireland and at Nottingham Forest most recently, but it's now 11 years, I think. It's like he left Ipswich in 2011 and he was clearly a frustrated figure there with the tools that he had to hand.
Yes.
He's a difficult man to please, as we all know, and it would be a difficult man to please, you'd imagine, in League One. Like, it just struck me that he doesn't have that mentality that some people have where they can make that bridge between the quality that they had as a player and the demands that they put on themselves as a player and the demands that are on people at a lower level.
Well, you must say you went back to 2008 when he was doing the job at Ipswich.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, it's got worse now, in my opinion, Richie. More difficult, not worse. It's more difficult now because the big transfers are going to the big clubs, and if you look at it, the richer the club, the more successful they are. I mean, you do get somebody like Brighton and various teams who are doing okay, But Sunderland would be in that bracket now. I mean, they were one time one of the richest clubs in the country. This is years and years ago.
Back in the 50s and 60s, yeah.
Yes, but not now. And if he goes to Sunderland, anybody going to Sunderland now, they have a big job on their hands to get promotion for a start. And if and when you get, say, young players coming in, the big clubs are snapping them up. It's very, very difficult to build a team. And if Roy Keane goes into, or anybody goes into London, it's going to be very, very hard to build a team, because if you produce any young players, they're going to be nicked. They're going to be nicked, and that's what's happening. That's why you've got the big clubs in the Premier League, the Chelseas and the Manchester Uniteds. They can afford to buy the best players and have their own young players. That's the thing, and it's more difficult for the smaller clubs now, because years ago you had them under contract. Now, after they sign a 2 or 3 year contract, as we know, they're free agents. So there's very, very little going for them in the lower divisions to produce young players, Richie.
Yeah.
If they produce an outstanding young player, before you know it, they'll have an agent and they'll tell the club they're not signing the contract again, and away they go. So it's very, very difficult. And I think, it on a personal level, I think Roy Keane has done a really good job on the panels. I think he could, and is having a very, very good career in that particular line, rather than going back to Sunderland with all the problems and all the things that are bound to happen while he's there. But again, that's up to him, Rich, if he wants to do it. But I mean, Sunderland, they're doing okay in their division. But it's going to be, if you look at the Premiership, the big clubs, the top 6 as they call them, unless he gets one of those jobs from the Sunderland job, having done a very good job, is the only way out to really compete at the top level.
He's been in the media so long now. Like, I think most people and younger listeners might think of Roy Keane purely as a media figure. They kind of know of the player and the reputation that he had as a player, but their most immediate knowledge of Roy Keane is from social media clips, from what he says on TV on a Sunday afternoon on Sky or on ITV, and the kind of the concept of him as a manager is alien to a lot of younger people. And that's the thing I'm kind of curious about, if he's too much of a media figure to go back into management, because like I guess you can sympathise to a degree. Like, you were a manager who transitioned into media, like you were doing a lot of media work, say in by the time 86 rolled around, right, late 85, and the FAI were looking for a new manager, and you were obviously involved in the conversations before Jack got the job. Like, I don't know what your thoughts were then. Would you have found it difficult after being such a public media figure? Well, some of the people from the FA approached me to put my name forward. Yeah. But I didn't do it with any great feeling. I didn't really want to do it. I was in the television, Richie, and I was happy doing that because I was a relatively short time in management. I never liked management. I didn't like it. It's a very, very difficult job. And you have to make some very, very big decisions, which are absolutely, can be very, very cruel. You release players, you don't sign young players. I never really took to management when I was in it. And when I got into the television and going into television, I was enticed to put my name forward for the Irish job. But to be honest, I didn't want it. I was happy doing what I was doing on the television. But that's the thing. Would management be a far harder ask? Like, we're watching Steve Bruce this evening after getting the West Brom gig, and he's somebody who's like, who's management is in his blood now. He probably doesn't know when to stop. But Keane's been out of it for 11 years, which is a lifetime in terms of football.
Yeah, but maybe he wanted to get back into it, Richie. We don't know. I mean, I don't know. I met Roy Keane a few times. I don't know him at all, really. But I did, he did an article in the paper within the last 3 weeks where he was posing the question, why aren't nobody coming for me? Or words to that effect. Yeah. So maybe over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, he might have wanted to get back into management.
Do you see him as having the temperament to be a successful manager in the modern day?
Well, if you go back a few years when he was first at Sunderland, I mean, he did take them from the second division into the first division. Yeah. What was then the first? I think maybe the Premiership. So that was a really good job. And then I think he fell out with the chairman at Sunderland, which would happen. And his next job, I think, was Ipswich. You know, Ipswich is always going to be a very, very difficult job. I mean, they were never, they were a top club at one time, but when he went there, I think they were in the second division. And it's very, very difficult to make a successful club that nowadays, particularly, that doesn't have the resources to do what needs to be done. So maybe he always wanted. I mean, at one stage he said, "There's no way he would want to go on the television."
And now look,
and did. But anyway, that's what he said at the time. So maybe Richie, he always wanted to get back into management and didn't get the offer.
Yeah.
We don't know. You know, I mean, I don't know Roy Keane really at all. But I'd like to ask him the question, like over the years that he's gone on to television, would he have been seeking a job, or did he want a job at that particular time? And maybe this is the first opportunity to come along for him to go back into management.
He quite possibly feels that there's a point still to prove in management, that the way the Ipswich gig ended for him mightn't have been the best, that he was an assistant in his last two jobs, and that the Forest gig, like, he was only there for 5 months under Martin O'Neill, and that seemed like, from the outside looking in, that looked like their Republic of Ireland reign in fast forward. Like, they went from the messiahs to this is going pretty badly, playing ugly football, and let's just, you know, call it a day and move on. So maybe those intervening, it's going to be 3 years now since he left Forest, has given him enough of an itch to want to get back in.
Well, it could. Maybe he always had the itch, Richard. That's what I say. We don't know, and he just wasn't offered the jobs. Now this one is coming along. Maybe he thinks, well, this is an opportunity to get back into what I want to do it. I'm not enjoying the television as much as I would do in management. I mean, I only talk my own point of view. I was the opposite way around. I enjoyed the television more than I did as management, and never went back into it. But that was my choice. But his choice might be totally different. He might think, well, I go to Sunderland and I can do a good job there.
Less heartache on the telly, I believe, John.
Definitely. Definitely. I know there was big decisions to be made in management in levels, dealing with young players that you weren't going to sign pro, letting players go. They had been good. All that was involved in management, and I obviously didn't like that side of it. You know, I never really enjoyed management, to be honest.
Okay. One man who seemingly does is Frank Lampard. He's jumped back in. He's gotten back on the roundabout. He's in at Everton, appointed there on a 2.5-year contract, I believe, just at the start of this week and on deadline day, and doing a bit of business as well. He came in essentially wanting to bring in players, and Donny van de Beek is one of those. Dele Alli is another. But it's a big job for Frank Lampard, because Everton, from the top down at least anyway, seems to be lacking in organisation. They've made some terrible buys in the transfer market in the last few years, so to clean up the mess that they currently find themselves in is a big job for Lampard. But he did an okay job at Chelsea. I think he was never going to match the expectations that were there, which were pretty high. He did an okay job at Derby, brought them to the brink of promotion as well. How do you think this is going to go for him?
I think it's a good appointment for him. I mean, there's lots and lots of potential at Everton, as we know. They're one of the great clubs, Richie. Depending if he gets the conditions that he needs to do the job. I think what's happened to the previous managers in the last few years at Everton, they had a director of football who I believe was doing all the buying and selling, and didn't leave it to the manager to get on with the job. Now, I think Frank is in a position at the moment, and Frank would know the game well enough now to know what needs to be done in management, to make that one of the conditions that I'm going to be in charge of the comings and goings here. And I think Everton are in such a desperate position, they would give him those conditions where they wouldn't give it to somebody else in the past. And, he did a very good job at Derby. I think he was on the right way at Chelsea. So he has promised, and he certainly has shown a lot of promise as a manager. And I think he will do well. I think Van de Beek is a good loan situation. The Dele Alli situation, I wouldn't be too sure about.
Why is that?
Because I think Dele Alli hasn't really played for the last at least two seasons.
Played well, you mean? Yeah.
Played well.
Yeah.
I mean, he had Jose Mourinho, who didn't want him. After a while, Antonio Conte, two of the best managers in the world, wouldn't have him because he wasn't doing his stuff. Now, I hear him in the paper today saying, oh, well, he's glad to get to a manager. Dele Alli hasn't done his stuff in the last 2 years, and I think it might be no coincidence that he's a very, very promising player, a very, very talented player, Richie, there's no doubt about that. And in his early days he looked a real player, but it might be coincidence, it might be not. But when he signed his new contract, which was a very lucrative contract, I believe, I don't think he's kicked the ball since.
Yeah, his form went off a cliff. I'm not sure if there are underlying reasons for that.
But he wasn't trying. Yeah, you know. I mean, you see him out there. He's a very talented lad, and you got Jose Mourinho and Conte. The two of them wouldn't have him. And I watched him myself from my own perspective. I don't think he was having a go. He got this big I think he got this big contract, and he just was strolling around. So it's no coincidence. Mourinho. I mean, Dele Alli at his best is a real player, and for Mourinho not to have him, and then Antonio Conte not to have him, let him go. He obviously wasn't doing his stuff. Now he's writing in the paper, he's glad to get it to a new manager, and he'll do this, that, and the other. Well, we'll wait and see. I think he will do well for a while to show that it wasn't me, it wasn't my fault at Spurs that I wasn't in the team. It was the manager's fault. But I mean, I wouldn't be putting my life on him.
Well,
after 6 months or 8 months to be doing his stuff.
Well, if anything is going to light a fire under him, it's the deal that he signed at Everton, because 4 years ago, with the form that Dele Alli was in, we would have presumed that by 25 he was getting his €100 million move to Real Madrid or to Juventus or whomever is going to be able to pay that kind of money. And instead now he finds himself moving down in the Premier League, with all due respect to Everton, and is on a deal whereby Everton won't fork over a penny until he reaches 20 appearances, at which point they'll give 10 million.
The club, though.
Yeah, but that kind of shows where Dele Alli's stock is at.
It doesn't bother to him. I mean, the fact is he'll be signing when he wasn't doing his stuff he was on a poor contract, and then he got a very, very, very good contract. And when he got, whether it be a coincidence or when he got that really good contract, he stopped playing. Now, he's gone to Everton now, and he's blaming the managers before him and people at Spurs that he wasn't playing as well. It was their fault. Now, I think he'll start playing well, at least for a while, for Frank Lampard, so as you can say, there, I told you, I'm back to form now. It was the manager that I played under before. But he's got the contract. You know, he got the big contract a few years ago. And that's why I think he stopped playing. Yeah,
he seems very friendly anyway, at least to the initial signs of him heading back into Everton in those videos that they've released so far. So from Dele Alli's perspective, I mean, the talent is there. It's just a matter of application, I guess. Speaking of talent,
it's total application. That's what I'm saying. I mean, if he'd applied himself, he was a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, he was one of the outstanding players in England and had a great future in front of him. Right. Now, why is he being loaned out and given away by Spurs, who've had two of the best managers in the world who won't have him? He wasn't trying. He wasn't doing his stuff, Richie. So, the contract he's got at Everton, they're virtually letting him go for nothing.
For nothing, yeah.
And they want to get rid of him. Well, you don't let great players go, or players of his potential go, unless they're not doing their stuff. And he hasn't been doing his stuff for at least 2 years. But he's blaming it on the managers that he's had. That's why I think he'll do well for a while here with Frank Lampard. I don't know if he'll continue to do it to show that it was the manager's fault that he wasn't doing it at Spurs. And that's not true. It was his fault. He just hasn't been doing it, and he has all the ability in the world, and he stopped playing for some reason.
Yeah, football, of course, on Off the Ball is brought to you with thanks to Sky. You can watch Everton take on Brentford in the FA Cup this Saturday live, only on Premier Sports. Now, Brentford won't have Christian Eriksen involved, John, but what a story this is. Back in football, Thomas Frank, according to the interview in the Times today, saying that he basically picked up the phone in December and said, Christian, do you fancy coming playing for Brentford? And that's how it started, and we find ourselves 7-8 months removed from those horrific scenes in Copenhagen to one of the feel-good stories of the year.
It's great. It's great. I mean, Eriksen is a real player. I mean, again, I'm only going back, I tell you. But look at what he's come through to play in relation to Dele Alli not playing where he's at Spurs. You know, this is a great story. And he's a terrific player anyway. But apparently he was dead for 5 minutes, Richie.
Yeah.
And he's coming back. I mean, the reason he's not in Italy because they have a rule there that if you have an ICD, you can't play. I mean, that's a medical situation, I think. Yeah. But Thomas Frank, the manager of Brentford, who's done a really good job, apparently knows him. He had him at the under-17s, and there are 8 Danish players there. But the fact that he's playing football again and wants to play football and give it his best, this is a real football story. Never mind Dele Alli messing about doing and wasting his ability, in my opinion, unless he really picks it up now in the future. But to see Christian Eriksen have to go through what he went through, Richie, and come back. Obviously he loves football, loves the game, wants to do it. You know, this is a great story. One of the real comebacks in football that I hope, and I'm sure he will, if he was anywhere near as good as he was before he had this particular situation. He's a terrific player, one of the best midfield players in the world, and I hope he comes back to where he was before. Yeah. At least he's back and he's having a go. It's a great story, Richie.
Yeah, we've had a couple of dark stories this week, so to have one that's just pure goodness and enthusiasm, and I guess it's just fantastic to see, basically, to see a player like that, Christian Eriksen, given what he's been through, come back. Listen, John, absolute pleasure as always.
Okay, Richie, thanks again.
We shall talk to you next week. We'll have more after these.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new